story begins during a global ice age. The protagonist, Han Feng, is killed by his girlfriend, Hana, and her accomplice. They betray and kill him to steal his last food supplies. However, after his death, he is reborn and awakens in his apartment 2 weeks before the catastrophe. Finding himself in his bed, the boy is disoriented and has no idea where he is. Light from the window floods the room as he asks himself, in shock, a single question: where am I? The hero reaches out to the sunlight, feeling the forgotten warmth. He admits to himself that he's already forgotten this incredible feeling of comfort. Looking at the calendar, Han Feng realizes today is June 28th. With only 2 weeks left until the end of the world on July 15th, he has returned to the past. Reality hits him, and a mad smile appears on his face. Could heaven really have granted him a second chance and a whole new life? His joy is marred by a strange correction. From the moment he awakened, his right hand glows with a mysterious red light. Han Feng stares in confusion at his fingers, engulfed in ghostly flames. His arm doesn't hurt or cause any discomfort. It only gives off a pleasant warmth. At first, he thought it was just a hallucination, but the glow doesn't go away. A sudden sneeze interrupts the hero's thoughts. The body's reaction is instantaneous and unexpected. Han Feng is completely shocked. After sneezing, his hand suddenly changed color. Now his right palm is ablaze with a bright green flame. Han Feng froze in horror. The glow on his right hand had not only changed color, but it also begun to rapidly grow in size right before his eyes. The guy is barely standing on his feet from the tension in the middle of the room, breathing heavily and trying to cope with the energy that has gotten out of control. Looking at his limb, Han Feng wryly remarks that science can hardly explain why his hand suddenly began to emit a multicolored glow. The energy behaves extremely unstable. The green flame grows and then fades, unlike the previous red glow, which was much calmer. Suddenly, a wave of extreme fatigue washed over Han Feng. He collapsed onto the sofa, suspecting that this strange green flame was literally sucking all the strength out of him. Trying to understand the situation, the hero waves his hand in rage, not understanding what the hell is happening to him and how to control it. Suddenly, an idea dawns on him. He remembers comic book plots, where the main characters always have hidden talents. Han Feng recalls the classic cliché. After reincarnation, the protagonist is obliged to receive some incredible, imbalanced ability. Deciding to test the theory in practice, he takes a huge kitchen knife in his glowing hand, expecting an instant magical reaction. However, the expected miracle does not happen. The knife remains an ordinary piece of metal, leaving Han Feng completely bewildered with a stupid expression on his face. Han Feng's stomach clenched with hunger, growling treacherously. His magical hand glowed green, but the kitchen knife within it still hadn't transformed into a superweapon. The hero looks into the refrigerator, but there, as they say, the mouse has hanged itself. The shelves are empty. Only one bottle of water stands forlornly. The guy's condition is critical. He is covered in sweat, complaining of extreme weakness, and feels like he is about to lose consciousness from exhaustion. Suddenly, his gaze catches on a can on the shelf. It's roasted soybeans, his last chance for a snack. Han Feng understands that such delicacies are a rarity in the post-apocalyptic world, and decides to fortify himself with them before going grocery shopping. As soon as he puts his charged right hand into the jar, a strange reaction occurs. Green light envelops the dry beans. The hero pops a bean into his mouth, anticipating the taste of the food, but boom. A veritable explosion of biological activity occurs right in Han Feng's mouth. It turns out that the hand's magic instantly sprouted the dry bean. A huge stalk with a whole bunch of fresh pods protrudes from the hero's mouth. Spitting out the root, Han Feng is shocked by this cooking, but the mechanics of the ability finally become crystal clear. Han Feng is shocked. He spits out an entire plant that had just sprouted in his mouth. The beans he was about to eat instantly transform into a full-fledged plant with roots and leaves. The boy listens to himself and realizes that the extreme fatigue that tormented him a second ago has completely disappeared. One of the fruits of his magic has acted as a powerful energy booster. He examines his hand closely. The green light he saw earlier is definitely related to this strange and frightening biological acceleration. To confirm his suspicions, Han Feng plucks a fresh pod from the plant he grew. Looking at the soybeans in his hands, the hero sees his body begin to emit bright green energy again. A sly grin spreads across Han Feng's face. He realizes the extent of his power and is eager to master all the nuances of this agricultural magic. But the excitement must be put aside. The hero understands that magic beans are cool, but the apocalypse is already at hand, and he needs to gather as many ordinary supplies as possible. The shot takes us to the bustling streets of the city. The usual bustle reigns, people enjoying the last warm days, unaware of the nightmare that awaits them. Walking through the crowd, Hanfeng analyzes what happened. First the red light, then the green, the frantic pulse, and finally the instant transformation of dry beans into food with a single touch. With a serious expression, he asks himself the main question: what is this power really capable of, and what are its limits? Hanfeng notices a familiar sandaled gait in the crowd, and at that moment, someone calls his name. It turns out to be Li Huna, the same girl from his past life. She seems incredibly friendly, flirtatious, and asks if he's decided to go shopping too, calling the meeting fate. Hanfeng's face contorted with shock and rage. He couldn't believe he'd met his future killer so soon. The hero remembers that Li Huna is the girl he dreamed about for 3 years and for whose happiness he did absolutely everything. Standing in the middle of the crowd, Hanfeng realizes the bitter truth. In that life, he was just a backup airfield for her. The hero's gaze turns icy, and his eyes flash with a furious light. He still can't get over the fact that this sweet person will ultimately kill him. Hanfeng clenched his fists tightly, trying to suppress his raging emotions and force himself to calm down. He understands that now is not the time for revenge. His first priority is preparing for the end of the world, so he pulls himself together when Huna calls out to him again. Huna waves her hands in front of his face in confusion, asking why he is frozen and ignoring her words. Hanfeng instantly puts on a friendly mask and smiles, justifying himself by saying that he was simply speechless because of her beauty. Huna laughs coquettishly, teasing Hanfeng. "Oh, come on, since when are you such a romantic?" She clearly doesn't sense any trickery and believes his false compliment. Deciding that she has a fish on the hook, Huna suggests taking advantage of the opportunity to meet and go shopping, already anticipating more purchases at someone else's expense. However, Hanfeng abruptly interrupts her plans. He dryly apologizes and says that he can't today, continuing on his way. Huna is stunned. She is clearly not used to being rejected by her loyal fan and looks after him in complete bewilderment. Hanfeng walks away through the crowd, thinking to himself that he has had enough. He no longer intends to be her wallet on legs. The frame moves to a huge advertising banner. WDMA Supercenter is the largest shopping center in the region. We are shown the scale of the hypermarket, huge shelves filled with goods and dozens of shoppers making their everyday purchases in City A. A contrasting shot from the future, the same shelves but now in the midst of a new ice age. The store is completely looted, covered in frost and ice. Someone was very lucky to have carried off everything on the first night. Back in the present, Hanfeng stands at the shelves with a full cart of groceries, intently examining the goods. His goal is to stock up on as many items as possible before the end of the world. The hero consults the survivalist's list on his smartphone. It lists supplies of food, medicine, protective gear, tools, and even weapons. Hanfeng realizes the list is enormous and he still needs to get a lot more. Looking at his account balance of 15,000, Hanfeng realizes there is one small detail. This money is catastrophically insufficient for full preparation for the end of the world. The guy is stunned, realizing the scale of the upcoming expenses: food, clothing, fortifying the shelter. How can he even manage to buy everything he needs for such a small amount? Suddenly, the phone in Hanfeng's hand began to vibrate, distracting him from his panicked thoughts. The hero is struck by a brilliant idea that literally makes a light bulb go on above his head. He remembered a resource he had previously ignored. Hanfeng, grinning wildly, opens dozens of microloan apps on his smartphone. He's determined to take on as much debt as possible, since he won't have to pay it back after the apocalypse anyway. Meanwhile, Huna is furious. She can't believe that this worthless guy dared to refuse her and leave her alone. The blonde is ranting, calling her ex a dumb loser without a car and swearing never to text him again, when suddenly the silence of the street is shattered by the roar of a powerful engine. Right in front of the astonished girl, a huge black pickup truck stops with a screech of brakes, and Hanfeng leans out of the window with a languid expression. "What people?" Huna freezes with her mouth open, unable to reconcile the image of the poor loser with the confident guy sitting behind the wheel of this beast. To her timid question about the car, Hanfeng casually replies that he just bought it, showing off a truckload of boxes of supplies. Hanfeng, with a forced smile, tells Huna a tall tale. His father's business in the States has taken off, and he's decided to make him happy. To further lull her into a false sense of security, the protagonist adds that he just drove Daddy to the airport. A close-up of a stunned Huna. Her eyes are frantically calculating the potential profit. She clearly didn't expect her cash cow to suddenly turn into a golden calf. The girl immediately switches to victim mode. She covers her face with her hand, pretending to understand the reason for his recent coldness. "And here I was wondering why you didn't want to go for a walk." Hyuna sheds a crocodile tear and dramatically wipes her eyes, declaring that she'd already begun to think Han Feng had decided to abandon her. Level 80 Manipulation in action. A close-up of Han Feng's face. The protagonist smiles condescendingly, almost ominously, and mutters a single word to himself. Silly girl. Han Feng takes Hyuna by the chin, looks her straight in the eye, and tells her the classic regressor lie. How can I live without you? I'll never leave you. Hyuna looks completely tamed at this moment. A flushed Hyuna finally lost it. She confesses her love to Han Feng and suggests they have dinner and watch a movie together to get to know each other better. As soon as she turned away for a second with the question, "What do you say?" Han Feng literally vanished into thin air. Only a transparent silhouette remained where he had stood. Yuna's face freezes in a mask of utter incomprehension. Her perfect evening is cut short before it even begins. View from above, Han Feng is already at the back of his pickup truck, filled with boxes. He cuts off her romantic mood with a dry remark, "I'm busy, I still need to carry all this." Hyuna stands there, completely stunned. Hyuna, perplexed, asks why the guy needs so many boxes. Han Feng, with a sly grin and a growing Pinocchio nose in his mind, replies that they're just necessary things and suddenly remembers that he has a gift for her. Upon hearing about the gift, Hyuna instantly melts and heads home, wishing her luck. Han Feng watches her go, throwing another box into the back of the pickup truck. A satisfied Hyuna thinks to herself that everything is going like clockwork. She's confident she has complete control over the guy and his new resources. Han Feng is no pushover either. As the girl leaves, he's glad she doesn't know about his biggest secret, his massive supply cache. The protagonist's internal monologue turns dark. He calls this warehouse his rope over the abyss. Against the backdrop of his shadow, a reaper with a scythe, he promises that at the end of the world, both Hyuna and the guy who killed him in his past life will get what they deserve. Han Feng's gaze fills with icy determination. He admits to himself that he's now even awaiting the apocalypse. The timer has started. The calendar shows Thursday, June 29th. A voiceover explains, July 15th is the day the end begins, when a snowstorm hits and the temperature drops to 20 degrees C. Preparations are in full swing. Han Feng oversees the unloading of a mountain of boxes outside his home. A voiceover warns, within a month, temperatures will drop to 70 degrees C and the world will be covered in ice. Food is ticked off the main character's list. The main character offers survival advice. Canned goods are the best choice. But the main thing is to keep the boxes tightly sealed to avoid annoying, nosy neighbors. Han Feng drags the last of his supplies into the apartment. Inside, it's a veritable bunker. 5-liter bottles of water, first aid kits, crowbars, and endless crates. He plans to move the fragile items himself under cover of night. Han Feng realizes that once the disaster starts, the electricity will go out for obvious reasons. So he buys a powerful generator and mountains of fuel to feed this handsome guy. The main character hires workers to modify the shelter. He converts the apartment to independent heating and, just in case, reinforces the windows and doors. It won't be a bad idea during the apocalypse. Han Feng sets aside a separate room for resources, which is now filled to the ceiling with gas cylinders, medicine, water, and boxes of provisions. The hero completes all preparations for July 14th, just one day before the temperature begins its deadly drop. The last items on the to-do list are winter clothes, already ticked off, and, most interestingly, a detailed study of my ability. The main character understands the harsh reality. To survive the coming ice age, reserves alone, no matter how vast, will not be enough. His only hope for long-term survival is the ability to control plants, which will allow him to always have fresh food. Han Feng looks at the bowl of beans he grew with his own power. They look fine on the outside, but his expression is one of obvious skepticism and nausea. The main problem becomes clear. The power is extremely unstable. The protagonist shakes his hand in rage, trying to activate it, but still can't figure out how to summon magic with a snap of his fingers. There's nothing else to do, time to sample it. Hoping that the magic beans are at least edible, Han Feng takes the first spoonful. After tasting the newly grown beans, Han Feng is relieved to find that they're not only edible, but delicious. He's now fully convinced that his new ability is an endless source of food. However, his joy is tempered by a harsh reality. The boy has no idea how to control his power. Sitting with a straight face, he tries to figure out how to make his right hand glow with a snap of his fingers, rather than randomly. Standing in the middle of his warehouse fortress, the main character reflects on the fact that so far his magical gardening experience is limited only to beans. Han Feng peers into the stocked refrigerator, eager to see if his magic will work on the other plants, vegetables, and fruits in his supply. A shot of the exterior of a residential complex at sunset. The silence before the storm is interrupted by a sharp sound coming from the hero's apartment. A sudden flash and sharp pain. Han Feng lets out a heavy groan as something goes wrong during his experiments. Coming to, the main character sees a huge broccoli plant in his hand. The first thing that pops into his foggy mind is, am I out of it? Han Feng kneels in the kitchen amid a pile of scattered vegetables and dirt. He clutches his head, which is literally splitting with pain after activating his power. The boy looks exhausted, sweat pouring down, his gaze heavy. He realizes the terrible cost of his magic. Every use of his ability deals a powerful blow to his brain and physical condition. Despite a terrible migraine, Han Feng continues tasting at the table. He concludes, at least I learned something, realizing that trial and error is the only path to survival. Before finally passing out from exhaustion, Han Feng decides to conduct a large-scale experiment and tests his ability on all the plants he could find in the house. Magic proves capricious. Han Feng watches in bewilderment as some of the vegetables in his glowing hand show no reaction to the effect, but others show explosive growth. An ordinary ear of corn stretches out and fills with strength right before your eyes, just like those magic beans. But there are also dangerous side effects. The third group of test subjects simply explodes in the hero's hands, throwing him back with a powerful flash. Coming to his senses among the scattered food, Han Feng looks with annoyance at what remains of the vegetables. After the explosion, they turned into very light embers. However, in this fiasco, the hero finds an unexpected advantage. These magical coals retain heat very well and can serve as fuel. Han Feng smiled contentedly as he warmed his hands over a bucket of glowing coals. He was now confident that he would not freeze in the coming ice age. Not wanting to stop there, the hero continues to try again and again, filling the apartment floor with defective coals and food scraps. Han Feng sits in a meditative pose, trying to control the chaos within himself. He concentrates on his breathing to direct the energy in the right direction. And it works. With a triumphant cry, Han Feng reveals to the world a giant, shining head of broccoli, grown under complete control. Han Feng looks exhausted. Sweat is pouring down his face, his gaze is unfocused. His heavy breathing reveals that his magical experiments are coming at a tremendous physical cost. The hero sits thoughtfully on the couch, twirling broccoli in his hands. He admits he hasn't yet found a clear pattern to how his power works, but he's certain some fundamental principle must exist. Having placed the vegetable on the table, Han Feng notes his first success. He at least roughly understood what kind of mental impulse is needed to activate the green hand. The main character sits down in a meditative pose right among the boxes of supplies. He comes to the conclusion that the key to mastering power lies hidden deep within his subconscious. While entering a trance, Han Feng visualizes himself completely naked in the center of a light-filled fairy tale forest, surrounded by peaceful animals. In his imagination, he achieves complete unity with nature. He is happy, strong, and literally merges with the wild world in his soul, touching the deer and birds. A sharp transition to reality, Han Feng suddenly opens his eyes, having fixed that very state of mental balance. With a triumphant smile and a mad glint in his eyes, the hero reveals his right hand, blazing with a bright green flame. He can now summon his ability with a snap of his fingers. New test samples are laid out on the table: fresh fish, canned food, and various types of steaks. I'll try it with meat, Han Feng decides, placing his magic-charged palm over a piece of raw pork to test how its power affects animal-based organic matter. Han Feng tries to manipulate the piece of meat with his usual ability, but is met with silence. The hero is confused. Is his green hand really designed exclusively for fruits and vegetables? The guy falls into mild despair, as the prospect of surviving the apocalypse on a vegan diet alone doesn't appeal to him at all. He literally begs for his power to work, clutching a steak in his glowing hand. It's a complete failure. The meat doesn't change at all, and Han Feng freezes with a look of utmost disappointment and devastation. Wait a minute. Deep in thought, the main character recalls seeing two different energies during his meditation. He'd already mastered the green one, but hadn't yet gotten around to the mysterious red hand. Han Feng decides to take a risk and calls on his inner red light, commanding this power to manifest itself. He concentrates again, holding the meat in the air, expecting things to go differently this time. And it works. Red flashes erupt from the fingers, enveloping the piece of flesh in an ominous glow. The process has begun. But the result is frightening. The meat in the main character's hands begins to pulsate madly, swell, and turn into some kind of shapeless, moving, bloody mass. Abomination! Han Feng screams in horror and throws the reanimated piece of flesh onto the floor with all his might. Having calmed down a bit, the hero examines the result. The meat has clearly reacted to the red light. To the touch, it feels simply cooked, though it still looks rather creepy. Han Feng peers at his hands, trying to comprehend the nature of this new power. He's confused. Is this mysterious red light really meant solely for warmth? The boy quickly realizes that things are much more complicated. His right hand begins to pulse with a bright blue neon light, revealing new facets of his abilities. The hero holds a piece of raw meat in his hands, which, under the influence of energy, begins to behave in a frightening manner. It literally disintegrates and changes structure before our eyes. A sharp shock. Han Feng notices something out of the ordinary, and his face contorts in utter surprise. The moment of truth, the main character realizes the duality of his power. Green light is responsible for the evolution and growth of matter, while red light is responsible for its decay and transformation. Han Feng has a crazy idea. What if he could combine both energies simultaneously, right on the food? A powerful surge of energy literally throws the guy back, and the room is filled with a blinding yellow light. When the light goes out, Han Feng is stunned. The piece of meat in his hands has not only changed, it has increased in size several times. Looking around the kitchen, the hero notices a strange detail. The bowl of beans standing nearby has vanished without a trace. It seems they literally merged with the meat during the synthesis process. The experiment's results exceeded all expectations. The resulting product looks, smells, and tastes even better than the most expensive natural meat. Han Feng is delighted with his discovery. Gathering his courage, Han Feng decides not to stop there and shouts, "One more time," ready to test his terrifying power once again. Another attempt ends in a crushing failure. The guy falls to his knees in rage, punching the floor, which is covered in dark stains from failed experiments. Having cooled down a bit, Han Feng sank exhausted to the floor among the scattered food products and realized that he had yet to fully understand the principle of how this energy worked. Despite the chaos in the apartment, the guy proudly examines his hands, shining with different lights, and admits that the day turned out to be unusually productive. A sinister grin appears on Han Feng's face. He is already imagining himself as the new Messiah, who, after the end of the world, will find himself at the very top of the world in the form of an invulnerable Superman. A sudden realization makes the madman shudder with horror. He understands that food supplies in this harsh world will not be enough, because he has no means of self-defense. Frantically packing vegetables into boxes, Han Feng firmly decides that he must, at all costs, obtain a firearm before the apocalypse covers the planet. Surrounded by boxes of provisions, the boy freezes and looks out the window in fear, noticing a strange flickering and the first signs of impending change. In the night silence of the city, under the gaze of a snow-covered statue of an angel, the fateful phrase sounds, "It has begun." Vast residential complexes are plunged into icy darkness, and the sky is covered with a shroud of snow. The great cold has finally come for everyone. Han Feng walks through the snow-covered city, aware that in a week the temperature will drop to a catastrophic 45 degrees Celsius. He realizes that time is running out, and he urgently needs a gun to protect his supplies, but obtaining one legally is impossible. Han Feng's thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a brazen voice coming from somewhere off to the side. Some guy is boasting loudly about his million-dollar projects, attracting the attention of passers-by with his provocative demeanor. Han Feng witnesses a ridiculous scene. In a parking lot, a guy in bright clothes is telling some poor guy that the local kingpin, Lao Wang from Zhigang, is practically his brother. Han Feng immediately recognizes this character, knowing who he's dealing with. This businessman is dressed in an expensive, opulent style, draped in fake gold and shivering in his lightweight sneakers. He offers a passerby a light, boasting that his bro also gave him some cigarettes. Meet homeless Joe, a local slicker with a rose tattoo on his neck who's always trying to look like a big shot. He persistently shoves a cigarette in the face of his interlocutor, claiming he doesn't like smoking alone. Despite his outlandish appearance, homeless Joe is a well-known figure. He's constantly up to some shady dealings and knows everyone in the area. He's like a living criminal directory, always up to date on all the goings-on. Joe tries to push a cigarette on a man, but he squeamishly refuses, claiming he only smokes premium brands. The sneaky one isn't discouraged and immediately starts babbling about his latest buddy's important business and their trip to the sauna together. Later, Joe, waving his arms, loudly discusses another $20 million deal on the phone, drawing the surprised glances of passers-by. He acts as if he's turning over entire fortunes right in the middle of the street. Watching this circus from the sidelines, Han Feng wonders, this slippery fellow might actually have the right connections. Perhaps through this chatterbox he'll be able to get in touch with the shady arms dealers. Han Feng decides to make contact and calls out to the rascal, calling him by name. Homeless Joe freezes, cigarette in hand, clearly surprised that someone serious has paid attention to him. Han Feng, with a wide but clearly forced smile, waves his hand. trying to attract the attention of his old acquaintance. He appears as friendly as possible, though his eyes betray a cold, calculating glint. Homeless Joe stands frozen in the middle of a snowy street, looking in confusion at the guy who suddenly called out to him. Passers-by scurry around, and the fixer tries to figure out if he's seen this man before. Han Feng joyfully exclaims Joe's name, pretending they've only just met, and laments his shaky memory due to his busy schedule. The blonde man in the purple jacket stands there, completely confused, sucking on a lollipop and trying to remember who he's talking to. While Joe eyed the stranger suspiciously, Han Feng began to actively look around, checking for any prying ears. His movements were abrupt and nervous, making the blonde man tense even more. The guy pulls Joe close and, covering his mouth with his hand, begins whispering something intently into his ear. The blonde's face instantly changes, becoming serious and puzzled by what he heard. Hearing the request, Joe bursts into tears, shocked and asking why Han Feng even wanted to do that. The boy only smiles guiltily and looks away, pretending to be mortally ashamed of his question. Having changed his anger to mercy, Joe takes out his branded wallet and begins to lecture him on how he doesn't engage in illegal activities. He sternly warns that guns are too serious a topic for Han Feng to get involved in. Han Feng sharply held up his hand, interrupting Joe's lecture and attempting to explain himself. He assured his brother that he had misunderstood and that his intentions were purely peaceful. With his face sweating with excitement, the young man begins to justify himself by claiming he needs the gun solely for self-defense. He tries to force a pitiful smile to soften the informant's heart. As evidence of his dangerous life, Han Feng tells a story of how he was recently riding his bike to work when a sullen, muscular man on another bike rode past and pointedly spat at him. To soften the informant's heart, Han Feng paints a vivid picture of a horrible story. A certain impudent man spat in his face in broad daylight. When the guy tried to protest and ask why they treated him like that, the aggressive muscle man on the bike didn't think twice and spat at him again. Han Feng's patience supposedly snapped, and he threw his attacker onto the asphalt, starting to deliver blow after blow under the watchful eyes of random passers-by. In the end, the defeated brute in tattered clothes quickly disappeared, promising at the end that Han Feng would deeply regret what he had done. The threat was not empty. The next day, a gang of 5 people with bats and rebar ambushed the guy at work and brutally beat him. With difficulty rising from the ground, bloodied and exhausted, Han Feng realized that without a weapon he would not be able to stand up for himself in this cruel world. Homeless Joe is enraged by such lawlessness and loudly protests that such behavior is simply unacceptable in society. Looking at the blonde man's overly violent reaction, Han Feng realized with skepticism that he seemed to have taken his invention too seriously. But the plan worked. Joe pats his bro on the shoulder and urges him not to say another word because the matter of honor is already at stake. Feeling sympathy for the victim, Homeless Joe promises to make things better and reaches for the phone to call his boss. Han Feng offers Homeless Joe a ride on the bus, but he merely scratches his head nonchalantly. Joe apologizes, saying he'd be happy to give him a ride, but his luxurious Panamera is currently undergoing repairs. Suddenly, Homeless Joe takes out his keys and presses a button, causing a huge black pickup truck parked nearby to flash its headlights invitingly. With a satisfied grin, he announces to a surprised Han Feng that he is, after all, on wheels. As they drive through the snowy city at night, Han Feng plays up the charade and admiringly asks how much the car cost. Joe, casually driving the SUV, replies that it cost him $700,000. Sitting in the passenger seat, Homeless Joe casually adjusts his hair and admires himself in the reflection of his smartphone. Meanwhile, he gives Han Feng directions, telling him to turn left at the next intersection. Joe takes a pompous selfie and immediately posts it on social media under the nickname, "the most handsome and sexiest." In the caption, he boasts that he can't get used to his new SUV. The car stops at a brightly lit building with signs advertising a casino and DVD, where some suspicious characters are warming themselves around a fire. Han Feng notices that the weather has gone crazy. Yesterday it was summer, and now everything is covered in snow. A man in a suit and glasses emerges from the building, eyeing the new arrivals with interest. Stern-looking men sit by the fire, one of whom smokes, eyeing Joe appraisingly as he emerges from the car. The bandits recognize the guest and call him Lao Li, perplexed as to why he's here at such a time. Joe, leaning casually against the truck, asks for a light and declares he has serious business with Boss Lu. Joe's friends notice the new car and excitedly ask if it's a new Tiger and how much it cost. The cigarette-smoking blonde boastfully replies that he paid only 700 grand for it. Han Feng watches this spectacle from the sidelines, barely suppressing an ironic grin. He's amused by Joe's audacity, so openly showing off someone else's car right in front of its real owner. Lao Li and Han Feng enter Boss Lu's office. A large man in an unbuttoned shirt covered in tattoos, clearly not happy to see the loose talker at this hour. The boss sits languidly on the sofa beneath a huge mural of Chinese characters, while Lao Li tries to diffuse the tension by brazenly asking for a cigarette. Lao Li introduces his companion as a brother who needs to buy a gun. Han Feng maintains an impassive demeanor while Boss Lu suspiciously asks about the weapon. A tense silence falls over the room as Han Feng watches the bandit's reaction closely, while Boss Lu slowly exhales smoke, studying the unexpected customer. The boss's face breaks into a mocking grin. He expected something more interesting from Lao Li than a banal purchase of weapons. The bandit throws a regular pistol on the table and names a price of 6,000, while Han Feng and Lao Li exchange glances in the background. Han Feng is in no hurry to take out the money. He throws up his hands and declares that he needs something more authentic. The guy puts his hand to his eye, simulating aiming, and clarifies that he is looking for a weapon with good optics. Boss Lu freezes with a cigarette in his mouth, shocked by the audacity and demands of this young man. Han Feng maintains an outward calm, although the beads of sweat on his face betray the seriousness of the moment in this gangster nest. Boss Lu leaps up in a rage, shouting that this isn't an ordinary store, and that Han Feng has clearly lost his mind, demanding a sniper rifle. He issues a harsh ultimatum: either the guy takes the gun or gets the hell out. While Boss Lu seethes with rage, Lao Li frantically tries to defuse the situation. He begins to spin a sob story about how it all began 5 years ago with a personal tragedy in Han Feng's family. The scene shifts to a snowy street, where an icy wind batters the windows of a convenience store. Against the backdrop of a blizzard, Lao Li continues his inspired and clearly fictional account of his companion's difficult fate. Boss Lu slams his palms on the table in shock, unable to believe what he's hearing. 3 children, and none of them are his? Lao Li, barely containing his false grief, confirms every word, finally softening the stern bandit's heart. Watching this circus, Han Feng only winced slightly at the absurdity of it all. He knew Lao Li was a master of spinning tall tales, but this time the intermediary had clearly overdone it with the drama. The plan worked. A touched boss. Lu suddenly changes his anger to mercy and agrees to get the sniper rifle. He promises to have everything ready in a couple of days, and Han Feng breaks into a grateful smile, seeing that his goal has been achieved. The boss immediately orders his henchman, Zhang Zi, to find a semi-automatic weapon and remember to stock it with ammunition. Meanwhile, Lao Li smugly winks at Han Feng as if to say, "I told you I'd handle everything." Suddenly, Boss Lu pulls out a powerful pistol and hands it to the boy. This isn't part of the deal, but a personal gift from the heart, so that Han Feng can protect himself now. Han Feng pauses, slightly perplexed, staring blankly at the weapon. It seems the crime boss's sudden generosity has caught him off guard. The young man takes the gift, but his attention shifts to his smartphone. Noticing his interlocutor's serious expression, Boss Lu looks at him questioningly, waiting for an explanation. Han Feng reports that his contacts in the government have received alarming reports of a sudden change in the weather. He gives Boss Lu some valuable advice. There will soon be shortages of absolutely everything, so it's best to stock up on supplies now. Boss Lu silently considers Han Feng's words, then briefly acknowledges that he has taken the information into account. His expression is one of stern concentration. The advice about stocking up on supplies has clearly given the group leader pause. Han Feng and Lao Li leave the building as a blizzard rages outside, obscuring the city's neon signs. Lao Li bids farewell, but Han Feng, irritated by his recent lie about his unfaithful wife, angrily orders the intermediary to get out of his sight. Lao Li, not at all offended, boasts of his resourcefulness and reminds him that it was thanks to him that the boss was in such a good mood. He even jokes that if the boy had asked, the boss would have gotten him a cannon that fired cannonballs, and Han Feng, in return, promises to buy him some cigarettes. Pretending to be a selfless good man, Lao Li modestly remarks that he simply enjoys helping people, but then quickly asks for the brand and quantity of cigarettes he wants. Finally, he promises Han Feng to take him to the sauna as soon as he pulls off another profitable deal. Alone with his thoughts, Han Feng analyzes the situation. He already has weapons and supplies, giving him a head start. Now he decides to focus on developing his magical ability, realizing that finding food is the key to his survival. Deciding to show off his toughness, or simply to warm up, Han Feng, with a scream, performs a spectacular spinning jump straight into a snowdrift. However, the landing is far from heroic, and the boy, before the astonished eyes of Lao Li, plummets into the snow. Lao Li runs up to his comrade in shock, asking if he's okay after such a hard fall. Han Feng, doubled over in pain in the deep snow, groans pitifully, realizing his right leg is badly damaged. Han Feng's face contorted in sharp pain, and his breath steamed in the cold. Barely suppressing a groan, he realized the worst. It seemed a freak accident had caused a serious fracture. Lying in the snow, barely breathing, the boy hands Lao Li the car keys. All the pathos of the moment vanishes when Han Feng, with his last strength, begs his companion to take him to the hospital immediately. Lao Li freezes with a ridiculous smile and scratches his head, confessing a shocking detail: he doesn't have a driver's license. The con man claims that breaking the law and driving without a license is illegal, leaving the injured Han Feng in a completely hopeless situation. The blizzard has become a real nightmare, and Lao Li, literally dragging the groaning Han Feng along with him, is trying to hobble toward the exit. The boy can barely stand, and the intermediary, encouraging him with military cries, is trying with all his might not to fall into the snowdrift with his charge. The lights of the nearest medical center are barely visible through the wall of icy wind and snow. The building is already covered in a thick layer of ice, and neon signs with red crosses flicker ominously in the darkness of the raging elements. Inside the hospital, the usual bustle reigns. A nurse named Ji-young is seeing off a colleague, wishing her luck on her night shift. As the city freezes, the staff prepares for the toughest shift of their lives. Left alone at the reception desk, Ji-young peers anxiously out the window, where a severe storm is raging outside. She has a feeling that this sudden cold snap will soon bring an endless stream of victims. A sudden call interrupts the girl's thoughts. The head nurse is urgently summoned to the main hall. There's a catastrophic shortage of staff, and Ji-young, grabbing a stethoscope on the run, rushes to help her colleagues. Meanwhile, Han Feng is already sitting in the doctor's office, studying the X-ray with a serious expression. The verdict is grim: the boy has a fractured right tibia, and now he'll have to wait outside while the necessary medications are prepared. Resigned to the weight of his circumstances, Han Feng sits in the hallway with his leg in a cast and crutches at his side. He looks at his photo with resignation, realizing that his grand plans for apocalypse preparation have been greatly complicated by one unfortunate accident. Lao Li, having fulfilled his duty, hurriedly took his leave, gesturing that he still had unfinished business. Han Feng merely nodded wearily in response and bid the intermediary farewell, left alone with his injury in the crowded hallway. The boy sighs heavily, staring into space, a drop of cold sweat rolling down his face. It's ironic knowing the end of the world is coming, but finding himself confined to a hospital bed at the most crucial moment. The hospital is packed to capacity. The corridors are filled with gurneys and groaning people, injured in highway accidents caused by the sudden snowstorm. Han Feng, marked with a red arrow, seems like a mere speck in this chaos, which is merely a prelude to a true icy hell. Sitting in the hallway with an X-ray in hand, Han Feng eagerly awaits his medication. The hospital is overcrowded, and he's clearly nervous about the delay. Suddenly, Han Feng's attention is drawn to something unusual passing by, and he lets out a puzzled, as he watches the pink-clad figure pass by. The operating room is bustling with activity. The young head nurse, Ji-young, expertly directs her colleagues while checking on a critically ill patient. Han Feng, watching from the sidelines, blushes in surprise, amazed that such a young woman already occupies such a high-ranking position. Ji-young displays remarkable kindness, squatting down in front of a young patient to comfort him with a teddy bear. Watching this scene, Han Feng realizes that she's not only talented, but also genuinely cares about people. The guy can't take his eyes off Ji-young's face, admiring her beauty and the way she glows from within while she works. Han Feng was so engrossed in looking at the crouched nurse that his gaze involuntarily dropped lower, causing his heart to beat faster from the angle he saw. Realizing the ambiguity of the situation, Han Feng turns into an embarrassed bundle of nerves, mentally scolding himself for staring at the girl so openly. The idyll is interrupted by an elderly man sitting nearby, who theatrically raises his hand and loudly calls out to the head nurse, attracting her attention. Ji-young immediately responds to the call and, with a short "run" on the go, hurries to the patient in need of help. The nurse politely apologizes to Han Feng for making everyone wait due to the heavy workload, while the old man next to him complains loudly about a sudden pain in his side. An elderly man pretends to be very ill, but in reality, he's secretly filming a nurse's legs on his phone under his gown. While Ji-young sincerely tries to help, the scoundrel is trying to find good angles for his video. An unsuspecting Ji-young smiles guiltily and blushes, explaining that for an accurate diagnosis, the patient needs an X-ray. The pervert sighs heavily and offers the nurse a personal examination of his body, promising to guide her hands to the right places. His face contorts into a greasy grimace, and his hand reaches for the girl. The old man unceremoniously grabs Ji-young by the waist and presses himself against her, continuing to film the scene on his phone. The girl is stunned by such impudence, unsure how to react to harassment in a public place. Ji-young closes her eyes in terror and begs the man to let her go, promising that the attending physician will be here any minute to examine her. She can barely hold back tears of humiliation and fear. Suddenly, a crutch flies into the frame and knocks the phone out of the pervert's hands with a precise blow. The old man flies off and falls to the floor, and Ji-young fearfully asks if he's okay. The culprit of the accident turns out to be Han Feng, who scratches the back of his head with an innocent look and apologizes, citing the fact that he is using crutches for the first time and has not yet learned how to operate them. A frightened Jian reaches for the fallen phone to check its safety, but the old man, in a panic, yells at the whole room, demanding that they not touch his thing. Despite his broken leg, Han Feng quickly snatches the smartphone. While the pervert spits and demands the gadget back, the boy carefully studies the contents of the screen. Han Feng's face darkens and his gaze turns icy as he confirms his guess about what exactly the patient was filming. Han Feng shows the old man his smartphone screen, which shows a photo taken under the nurse's skirt. In an icy tone, the young man advises the scumbag to leave as quickly as possible before the guards throw him out by force. Han Feng declares that he will not return the phone and issues a harsh ultimatum. If he sees the old man doing something like this again, he will expose him and leak all the evidence online. The old man, realizing that he is pinned to the wall, falls into a rage mixed with wild fear and only clenches his teeth in helplessness. Leaving the phone behind, Han Feng watches as the pervert flees the hospital in panic, abandoning all attempts to harass Ji-young. The nurse, perplexed, tries to stop him, unable to understand the reason for his flight. Ji-young is genuinely surprised that the sick patient was able to rush to the exit so quickly, while Han Feng is simply amazed at her extreme naivety. Finally, Han Feng reveals his hand and shows Ji-young the contents of his phone, bluntly calling the escaped old man a pervert. The girl covers her mouth in shock, realizing the danger so close at hand. Having done his good deed, Han Feng hands Ji-young the smartphone and asks her to decide for herself, delete the photos, or take them to the police. He asks her to be careful, reminding her that the world is full of such people. A touched Ji-young warmly thanks her savior, but immediately switches to work, noticing that Han Feng has arrived with a leg injury. Ji-young gets to work, her dexterous hands wearing medical gloves quickly and expertly applying a tight bandage to Han Feng's ankle. The procedure is complete, and Ji-young announces with a kind smile that everything is ready. Han Feng, sitting on a bench with a crutch, admits that the treatment was completely painless. Ji-young, blushing with embarrassment and gratitude, vows to never let bad guys get away with it again. Han Feng, observing her determined attitude, only kindly advises her to be more careful in the future. While the boy is giving instructions, his foot accidentally bumps into the nurse's chest. Han Feng freezes in shock, realizing that Ji-young is so engrossed in her speech that she doesn't even notice this ambiguous contact. The idyll is interrupted by a voice from the hallway. The head nurse is called away on business. The girl immediately switches to work, and Han Feng, still a little embarrassed, remains sitting on the couch with his crutches. As they part, Ji-young sternly orders the boy to return for a dressing change in exactly 1 week. Han Feng waves and agrees, though a hint of doubt can be seen in his eyes. Left alone, the boy thoughtfully repeats, "In a week?" Han Feng understands perfectly well that only a few days remain before the ice apocalypse, and the world will soon change forever. Limping on crutches, Han Feng leaves the hospital under the gaze of the staff who see him off. It was his last visit to a civilized medical facility before the end of the world. The next day dawns, and gray skies blanket the city. The first snow falls on the streets, heralding the beginning of the end, as the few passers-by bundle up in jackets and shelter under umbrellas. Breaking news is playing on TV. A bespectacled announcer is reporting a sharp cold snap and unusually heavy snowfalls across the country in the next 24 hours. The news ticker flashes messages about school cancellations, but authorities are urging citizens not to panic. The situation is reaching global proportions, with temperature fluctuations being recorded in Egypt, Dubai, and the Amazon basin. Experts from 46 countries are urgently convening at a UN meeting to determine the cause of this weather outrage. Experts are trying to reassure the public, stating that the cold weather will be short-lived, but urging them to take precautions. Meanwhile, fireplaces are already blazing inside homes, trying to fight off the approaching cold. On the TV news, the announcer insistently urges citizens to remain calm, not to believe rumors, and not to sow panic. Authorities assure that the disaster will soon end, but Han Feng's apartment, filled with huge water tanks and boxes, suggests he's prepared for a much more severe scenario. Sitting on the sofa with a glass of wine, Han Feng listens with a grin to the officials' empty promises, realizing that the bigwigs are simply trying to pacify the crowd with lies. He knows the truth from bitter experience. If he hadn't died one day, he might have believed these fairy tales too. Han Feng peers into his storage room, which now resembles a veritable bunker. Ceiling-high shelves are stacked with boxes, gas cylinders, and firewood. The house is fully protected, the heating equipment has been tested, and is ready for the long winter. The guy sips his wine contentedly, feeling completely satisfied with his preparation. Now he has nothing to worry about. The silence of the apartment is broken only by the ringing sound of notifications coming through on a smartphone. Han Feng idly scrolls through his phone's feed, noticing a message from a friend who, even in this cold, manages to send explicit photos. He realizes that fulfilling her assignment in the current climate would be too expensive to waste resources on. It's only the third day of the apocalypse, and Han Feng is already becoming unbearably bored within four walls. Scratching his head, he admits that loneliness can be the biggest challenge in surviving. Han Feng's injured leg is still heavily bandaged and in poor condition. He realizes with frustration that a full recovery from such a fracture would normally take several months. To pass the time, the boy continues watching popular science videos online. His attention is drawn to a video about a medical miracle. Doctors discussing whether there are people in the world capable of superhuman regeneration. The video tells the story of a man who jumped from a 15th floor, but after surgery, his organs and bones began to heal at an incredible rate. Han Feng freezes, peering at a smartphone screen, trying to figure out whether this is real or just another clickbait. A flash of insight flashes in Han Feng's eyes as he connects the facts in the video with his own abilities. It seems he's found a way to speed up his recovery and is finally convinced that this world is beginning to change. Han Feng, with a mysterious smile, realized how obvious the solution to his problem was, which had been right under his nose all this time. Surrounding himself with a mountain of snacks and drinks, the guy concentrates the mysterious green energy in his palms and applies them to his broken leg. Leaning back on the sofa, Han Feng wondered doubtfully if he had let his imagination run wild and hoping for the miraculous power of the green light. Fatigue takes its toll. The guy yawns sweetly and falls into a deep sleep, phone in hand. In a vivid and wild dream, Han Feng appears as a chieftain wearing a magnificent feather headdress, riding a giant goat and leading an entire flock of goats flying through the sky. Suddenly, the idyll is broken. The riding goat makes a sharp jerk and the stunned guy flies out of the saddle, helplessly tumbling through the air. The fall ends with a painful landing in thick red grass, accompanied by the distinct and frightening crunch of bones. Han Feng writhes in excruciating pain on the ground as one of the goats from his dream slowly approaches him. The animal begins to unceremoniously lick the guy's injured leg with its long, rough tongue. Taken aback and tickled, Han Feng jerked his leg up, sending the annoying animal flying. In the midst of a surreal dream, Han Feng feels an invisible force or limbs tightly grip his injured leg, enveloping it in a bright green glow. He wakes up screaming, bolting upright on the couch, unsure where the nightmare ends and reality begins. Panting and drenched in a cold sweat, Han Feng tries to come to his senses in his apartment, surrounded by cluttered bookshelves. "What kind of nightmare is this?" he cries out in horror, still feeling the phantom pain and strange tingling sensation in his body. Han Feng's gaze falls on his right leg. The bandaged limb pulses with a magical emerald light that literally pierces through the layers of cloth. Green sparks of energy dance in the air, confirming that his awakened nature power had activated spontaneously during his sleep. Grabbing a pair of scissors, Han Feng quickly cuts the bandages and tosses them aside to check the bone's condition. To his great surprise, the leg appears completely healthy and there's no trace of the recent fracture left. Standing in the kitchen with his back to the camera, Han Feng gazes thoughtfully at his hands, contemplating the miracle that has occurred. He wonders if the mysterious green light really can instantly heal such severe injuries while the owner of the house sleeps. To finally confirm his suspicions, the boy takes a sharp kitchen knife from the stand and resolutely raises it above his palm. Gritting his teeth in tension, Han Feng prepares to conduct a dangerous experiment on his own body. "Ooh," he exhaled shortly, carefully but confidently pressing the knife blade to the pad of his finger. His hands trembled slightly, but the thirst to explore the limits of his new power was stronger than the fear of pain. The sharp steel does its job, and a scarlet drop of blood appears on Han Feng's finger. He closes his eyes and freezes, awaiting his body's response to the injury. The theory is instantly confirmed. The boy's hand erupts into a powerful green flame of life energy. The glow concentrates around the wound, visibly healing the cut and demonstrating incredible regenerative potential. Meanwhile, outside, work is in full swing. A group of people in warm clothing is clearing the snow-covered area in front of a multi-story building. The men press together against the trunk of a fallen tree to the precise count of 1, 2, 3, trying to clear a passageway in the face of the advancing ice age. Zhang Shuiyu, with a polite smile, thanks everyone for their hard work in the freezing cold. He turns to an elderly man, Uncle Luo, expressing special gratitude for his help on such a challenging snowy day. Luo Guangyao, chuckling modestly, adjusted his cap and turned his attention to the young men standing nearby. He claimed that the main credit goes to the brothers from the Wang family, who had done a tremendous job. The twin brothers, Wang Xiaowu and Wang Xiaowen, look extremely embarrassed by such praise. The boys, wearing matching blue hats, blush and laugh awkwardly, trying to hide their shyness. Suddenly, a loud sound breaks the silence. Someone trips and falls noisily into a deep snowdrift. The Wang brothers react instantly, dropping their shovels and rushing to help. The fallen girl turns out to be Jin Shui, wearing a pink down jacket. One of the brothers asks worriedly if she's hurt and warns that the ground beneath the snow is very frozen. A stranger in gray gloves extends his hand to Jin Shui and helps her to her feet. The girl smiles broadly and assures her rescuers that she is perfectly fine. After the incident is resolved, the Wang brothers prepare to clear the main road, offering to contact them if any difficulties arise. Jin Shui, inspired by their example, picks up a shovel and promises to handle it himself. A group of people continues to battle the elements, trying to finish their work as quickly as possible. Zhang Shuiyu notices that the snowfall is getting heavier and urges everyone to hurry so they can get shopping before the roads become completely snowed in. Luo Guangyao, taking a deep drag on a cigarette, gazes thoughtfully into the distance. The mention of shopping prompts an important thought, which he decides to mention out loud. Zhang Shuiyu asks what exactly the old man remembered, but Luo Guangyao merely scratches his head and avoids a direct answer. He dismisses it as unimportant, though his concentrated expression suggests otherwise. Uncle Lo, puffing on a cigarette, shares a strange rumor with his neighbor. There's a guy living nearby who transports mountains of stuff in a pickup truck every day. Zhang Shuiyu doesn't see anything strange about this, assuming that the man has simply recently moved in and is settling into his new apartment. However, the security guard's experienced eye noticed details that didn't fit in with a typical move. Among the things, he spotted a fireplace and gas cylinders. The old man is sure that such careful preparation is more like gathering resources before the real end of the world. The conversation is interrupted by the Wang brothers. The twins cheerfully report that the main road has been cleared and is now safe to walk along. Suddenly, a man with a wild look and a cigarette in his mouth sneaks up behind the boys, breaking into their conversation with a frightening enthusiasm about the apocalypse. But his triumphant appearance is interrupted by a well-aimed snowball thrown straight into his face, causing the stranger to almost swallow his cigarette. The culprit turns out to be Luo Yan, a stern girl in a blue down jacket, who orders the chatterbox to stop messing around and get back to work immediately. An argument breaks out between them. The guy angrily points his finger at Luo Yan, claiming that he works harder than everyone else, but she quickly puts him in his place. Zhang Shuiyu, remaining calm, calls on everyone to stop arguing because the main task is accomplished, the way is clear. While the snow is blowing outside, Luo Yan, with a beaming smile, announces a break and suggests everyone get ready for a trip to the supermarket. The neighbors, tired of shoveling, greet this news with a joyful, "Finally." Twin brothers, Wang Xiaowu and Wang Xiaowen, are immediately glued to their phones. They are worried about their families and plan to send more supplies to their mother in their hometown, realizing the situation is getting serious. Uncle Luo, still smoking a cigarette, asks Zhang Shui if he sees a connection between the strange events and this protracted natural disaster. Zhang Shuiyu, staring at a smartphone, maintains an icy calm. He frankly admits to the old man that he's not particularly concerned about what's happening. The young man is certain it's just a normal snowstorm that will soon end, and everyone's lives will return to normal. He believes there's no hidden connection. Adjusting his glasses, Zhang Shuiyu added with a sly half-smile, "Even if the disaster drags on, is it bad to have more supplies at home?" Uncle Lo bursts out laughing, appreciating the young man's practical approach. He acknowledges his interlocutor's point, marveling at how quick-witted the young man is, despite his age. The snowstorm outside is only getting worse, and Zhang Shuiyu, opening his umbrella, calls on his neighbors to avoid pushing and form a line. He gives the group 3 hours to return. Meanwhile, Han Feng is sleeping peacefully on the couch among empty snack boxes until someone starts pounding furiously on his door. The heavy knocking makes him struggle to open his eyes. A sleepy and disheveled Han Feng opens the door, rubbing his eyes and apologizing for keeping his guest waiting. Apparently, the Ice Age isn't a reason to forgo a good nap. A blond man, smoking a cigarette and wearing purple gloves, boastfully displays a heavy sniper rifle with a powerful scope. He announces that he has a request for a semi-automatic weapon. The young man hands Han Feng a black case containing a rifle. Han Feng thanks his guest for gathering all the necessary supplies in advance. The blond man exhales a stream of smoke and, with a heavy sigh, complains about the problems that have arisen. Han Feng cautiously asks what's wrong. A guest throws up his hands against the dark, snow-covered building's skylight. He explains in shock that they cleared the way to the store, but overnight the entire supermarket was completely empty. Han Feng freezes, a cold sweat running down his face, unable to believe what he's hearing. He wonders if it's true. The blonde says goodbye and leaves, advising Han Feng to dress warmly because of the cold. Han Feng sees him off with a strained smile. Left alone, Han Feng locks the door. He stands in the hallway hung with ammunition amid a pile of cardboard boxes. Han Feng's gaze turns dark and focused. He can't understand how someone could have looted an entire supermarket in just one night. Han Feng recalls scenes from books and comics he's read. In the background, the image of a powerful silhouette emerges, capable of sucking enormous objects, ships, and equipment into spatial rifts. Han Feng seriously wonders if people with such abilities actually exist. He clenches his fist, which begins to pulse with a bright green light. Han Feng sits on the sofa, completely immersed in studying his abilities, because he understands that in order to survive an encounter with other superhumans, he must think through countermeasures in advance. The guy analyzes his progress in a diary, noting that his creative power reacts with various products, from legumes to meat, but this process is extremely unstable. Han Feng takes a single soybean from the bowl to try his luck at transforming matter once again. The chances of success are catastrophically small. With beans it only works 1 time out of 10, and with meat the probability of a positive outcome is even less. The owner of the house stares at the tiny object in his fingers, wondering why his energy is not producing a consistent result, as his hand becomes enveloped in emerald flames. There is a loud bang, and instead of the expected growth, a thick green smoke is released. Han Feng's latest attempt ends in failure. A simple, shapeless boulder emerges from a cloud of smoke. The boy stares at the result in shock, realizing that the success rate today is truly negligible. Despite his fatigue, Han Feng refuses to give up and grips the stone fiercely, determined to figure out the mechanism of his power today at any cost. It's approaching 11 o'clock in the evening, and piles of junk and failed samples from hours of testing are growing around the smartphone on the table. Drenched in sweat and exhaustion, Han Feng finally holds a full-fledged soybean stalk with fruit in his hands, realizing that he seems to have found the right algorithm of actions. Han Feng, exhausted and covered in sweat, realizes the unpleasant truth. Green light energy is extremely unstable when used. His room is littered with piles of charred stones, the result of countless failed attempts to materialize food. Analyzing the process, Han Feng realizes that each product has its own unique energy value. A complex fluctuation scale is visualized on the screen, where maintaining energy levels within a strict range is essential for success. Another attempt ends in failure when the chart suddenly spikes, breaking the acceptable limits of the red zone. The young man watches helplessly as, instead of soybeans, another mountain of useless waste grows on the table. Han Feng clearly sees the mechanics of his failures. If the rhythm is off even for a split second, the seed doesn't germinate but turns into a dead, black stone. Creating the perfect fruit requires pinpoint precision and timing. Suddenly, a realization dawns on Han Feng. He peers intently at his abilities interface, his expression comically puzzled. That glowing bar seems eerily familiar. The guy recalls an old online music game that was at the peak of its popularity 10 years ago. The principle of controlling the energy in his hand exactly replicates the mechanics of a rhythm game, where you need to hit the right notes. Having found the right rhythm, Han Feng closes his eyes and focuses entirely on his inner sensations. Now he's not simply expending energy, but playing the energetic strings, seizing the perfect moments for a burst of creativity. A loud cry of triumph echoes throughout the apartment. Ha ha, perfect! A lush, bright green soybean stalk finally appears in Han Feng's hands, and the words, "perfect," literally float above it. Despite the late hour, the inspired young man heads to the kitchen to consolidate his efforts. Surrounded by boxes of noodles, he prepares for the most challenging test of his skills. Han Feng picks up a chicken leg, realizing that the principle of organic creation must be similar. He is determined to learn how to materialize meat to ensure a luxurious diet in the permafrost. A complex interface, reminiscent of a rhythm game, appears before Han Feng's eyes. Rows of arrows run above and below, demanding his utmost concentration. He clutches a piece of raw meat, and his body is enveloped in flashes of red and green energy, resonating with every movement. Miss Sign lights up above the boy's head. Han Feng curses in fury as he watches his valuable energy disintegrate into a useless black blot right in his hands. Despite yet another mistake and growing irritation, Han Feng doesn't give up and tries again. He frantically waves his arms, trying to control the escaping black matter, which refuses to take the desired shape. A tense silence hangs in the kitchen as the exhausted and sweaty boy sits on a stool amidst mountains of empty boxes. Han Feng freezes, focusing all his attention on the small block in his palms, which begins to glow faintly green. Han Feng enters a new level of perception, where every movement of the arrows on the screen is accompanied by sound effects. He meticulously adjusts to the rhythm, directing streams of energy into the meat to stabilize the product's structure. The boy's gaze becomes wild and intensely focused as the control sphere on the panel reaches a critical point. Now! Flashes through Han Feng's mind, and he delivers the decisive blow to his ability's interface. A powerful burst of steam and energy illuminates the kitchen as Han Feng finally executes the perfect action. A triumphant yet slightly terrifying grin crosses his face. He senses the creation has been a success. Exhausted but utterly happy, Han Feng collapses to the floor, breathing heavily from exhaustion. The long-awaited phrase escapes his lips: a way to synthesize meat has finally been discovered. While the hero celebrates his victory within four walls, a true nightmare unfolds outside the window. The metropolis is completely covered in snow. The newscaster announces that today is July 18th, and the country has been living through a horrific snowstorm for 4 days now. While authorities report on the heroic fight against the elements, Han Feng sleeps peacefully on his sofa. He's unconcerned about the world's problems, having ensured his own survival by solving the food problem in a most unusual way. Han Feng sleeps soundly as alarming news plays in the background. Extreme snowfall has caused disruptions to transportation, electricity, and internet service across the country. The announcer urges citizens to remain patient and await assistance from rescuers who are trying to deliver supplies to the affected areas. A young man wakes up in his cozy apartment, filled with boxes of supplies, and stretches sweetly while listening to the breaking news. He notes with a bitter smile that everything is starting to break down just like it did in his past life. Han Feng's attention is drawn to his smartphone. The notification center is literally bursting with hundreds of new messages. In the building's community chat, residents are panicking as they try to figure out why no one can reach emergency services. The homeowner watches with irritation as his neighbors stir up a commotion in the chat room of the Happiness residential complex. He opens the management company's chat room, where people are horrified and asking why news about the rescue has completely ceased. Han Feng stares thoughtfully at the screen, recalling the vague rumors of war he heard before his reincarnation. The situation outside the window quickly transforms from a weather anomaly into something far more ominous. Meanwhile, Zhang Shuiyu sits in a cold room under the glow of a heater, wrapped in a warm coat and scarf. He writes in the chat that many people are running low on food and suggests prioritizing assistance for those in the most desperate situations. Zhang Shuiyu proposes the creation of a temporary residence committee, a sort of emergency headquarters for coordinating actions and mutual support. Other neighbors gather around it, ready to take charge of maintaining order in the building. Han Feng merely smirked cynically at the announcement of the committee's creation. He remembered perfectly well that the previous attempt had started exactly the same way, and he knew the consequences of this attempt to organize a society. It's July 19th, the 5th day of the end of the world, and the temperature has dropped to a blistering 40 degrees Celsius. The high-rise buildings of the residential complex are barely visible through the thick wall of the incessant snowstorm. The extreme weather conditions completely destroyed the city's infrastructure. The heating system was completely shut down. External air conditioner units and building windows were covered in a thick layer of ice and frost. While a deadly snowstorm rages outside, ordinary people struggle to survive in their freezing apartments. Some wrap themselves in piles of blankets, while others burn their last books in makeshift stoves, knowing the situation is only getting worse. Meanwhile, Han Feng's apartment is a veritable paradise. The fireplace is blazing hot, and a delicious strawberry cake and ice-cold cola grace the table. He's enjoying the comfort while screams about hordes of zombies in a video game blare from the speakers. Han Feng is completely immersed in the gameplay, reacting emotionally to every event on the screen. His idyll is interrupted by a sudden call from an unknown number, forcing him to look away from the console. With his mouth stuffed with food and lazily sipping his drink through a straw, the young man answers the call. On the other end of the line, a representative from the 8th house informs him that road clearing will begin in 20 minutes and demands that Han Feng report to the underground parking lot for a check-in. Hearing about forced labor in such freezing temperatures, Han Feng nearly seethed with indignation. He shouted furiously into the phone that the organizers were crazy and he would never go shoveling mountains of snow. Having cooled down a bit, the guy decides now is not the time for open conflict with his neighbors, lest he draw unnecessary attention to the secrets of his apartment. He puts on a heavy down jacket with fur, grabs a shovel, and goes out into the hallway to join the other tenants. Coming downstairs, people stand frozen in shock in front of the glass doors of the entrance hall. So much snow has fallen that it has almost completely blocked the first floor, turning the exit into a wall of ice. Neighbors chatter in confusion, unable to comprehend how the snowdrifts have grown so large overnight. Men, shovels at the ready, prepare for the hard work, hoping to at least open the door. One of the activists notices Han Feng and beckons him over. He approaches reluctantly, sensing he'll be forced to work alongside everyone else. Under the command of a senior officer, a group of men form a line. At the signal 1, 2, 3, they begin to push their shoulders against the blocked door, trying to force a way out. At the command 3, a group of men rushes forward and breaks down the locked door. A powerful blast of icy air and snow dust instantly rushes into the hall, leaving everyone frozen in shock. Residents panic, shielding their faces from the scorching wind as the full scale of the disaster dawns. All around them, cries of unbearable cold rage. The snowdrifts outside are so thick that opening your eyes or taking a step is simply impossible. Han Feng, wrapped in his down jacket, barely suppresses a shiver from the piercing cold. He understands that any attempt to go outside in this weather is a surefire way to get frostbite or even die. The neighbors, horrified, discuss how even a crowd couldn't clear such a pile of snow, as it was so dense it was so hard to move. Han Feng watches them silently, agreeing with the general consensus. Only a madman would dare to walk out the door right now. The silence and fear are broken by someone's bold cry, "I'm going." Han Feng turns sharply at the sound, recognizing the painfully familiar voice. An arrogant, blonde-haired man appears in the doorway, leisurely puffing on a cigarette. Han Feng, with a sly grin, recognizes him as Li, the local bully who calls everyone present a bunch of weaklings and boasts of his strength. Li ignores his neighbor's warnings that now is not the time for bragging. While the other residents decide to wait out the storm in the warmth, he demonstratively prepares to brave the elements. With a wild cry, Li plunges straight into the snowy abyss, trying to break through with his bare hands. Huge snowdrifts literally engulf the daredevil under the terrified gaze of the crowd. A moment later, only a muffled, pitiful cry for help can be heard from the snowy depths. The passage the boy was trying to break through is instantly covered in a crust of ice, turning it into a trap. Li's face instantly turns blue from the icy cold, and all that escapes is a shrill cough. The proud, brave man finds himself on the brink of death, unable to withstand the icy apocalypse. The shockwave and the sound of breaking glass deafen everyone present as the icy elements finally take over the fragile barrier. Li lay helplessly on the floor, covered in snow and shivering from the biting cold, while Han Feng and the other neighbors watched in horror at his plight. Han Feng, keeping his cool, urges the group to go to the parking lot and find the leader there to report what happened and wait out the storm. The vast city has become a lifeless, icy wasteland, where skyscrapers are barely visible through a thick blanket of endless snowfall that is impossible to clear by hand. A group of survivors reaches Zone C on the ground floor of an underground parking garage, hoping to find shelter and answers there. Zhang Shuiyu, standing in front of a crowd of residents, announces that the parking lot will become an official donation and food distribution site. Han Feng watches the polite coordinator from the crowd, trying to match his image with what he heard in the comment chat. The guy looks closely at the leader of the residents, realizing that it is this man in glasses who heads the so-called committee. Zhang Shuiyu, with a gentle but calculating smile, thanks his neighbors for their concern and willingness to share their resources. The coordinator admits that he did not expect such generosity from the residents, and on behalf of all those in need, he expresses deep gratitude to those gathered. Zhang Shuiyu continues to address the crowd, convincing them that only through unity and shared efforts will they be able to survive this crisis. The neighbors listen with hope, believing their leader's every word. Han Feng watches this spectacle from the sidelines with obvious skepticism. He understands perfectly well that this catastrophe won't end so easily, and secretly gloats, knowing how much all these people will regret their choices. Shivering from the cold, the blonde Li informs Han Feng that he can't stay here any longer and plans to return upstairs. Han Feng dismisses the poor fellow with indifference, seeing no point in detaining him. Suddenly, Han Feng's attention is drawn to a commotion off to the side. He turns toward the sound, noticing someone quickly making their way through the crowd. It turns out to be a nurse, straining herself to carry a huge stack of heavy boxes. A girl in a funny shark hoodie desperately begs people to make way for her, while Han Feng is surprised to recognize her as an old acquaintance. At some point, the load becomes too heavy, and the boxes begin to slip from the girl's hands. She screams in fear, realizing that all the contents will end up on the floor. Han Feng reacts instantly. He catches the falling weight and holds the girl, preventing her from falling. The nurse, breathing heavily and flushed with embarrassment, barely recovers in his arms. Overjoyed by her miraculous rescue, the girl profusely expressed her gratitude. However, upon looking at her savior, she suddenly realized who stood before her. The nurse's gaze falls on the boy's legs, and she freezes in utter bewilderment. She clearly remembers his recent injuries and can't believe her eyes. The girl exclaims in shock, wondering how his leg could have healed so quickly. Han Feng freezes, his expression horrified, realizing that the secret of his incredible regeneration is in danger of being revealed. Han Feng, visibly nervous, tries to justify himself to Jin Shui. He gestures wildly, assuring her that he's simply had incredibly fast regeneration since childhood, and that any bruises disappear on their own in just a couple of days. Jin Shui freezes, peering into her interlocutor's face with undisguised curiosity. Her gaze is focused, as if trying to unravel the mystery hidden behind these ridiculous excuses. The nurse's eyes light up with fanatical delight, and sparks literally flare in her pupils. She's genuinely amazed by such a unique ability, which makes Han Feng tense up even more. Trying to change the subject, Han Feng offers to help with the heavy load. Despite Jin Shui's objections, he claims to be a real strong man and wants to thank her for the bandage he helped her with last time. As soon as the boxes land in Han Feng's hands, his face falls in shock and his legs begin to buckle. The load is so overwhelming that he can barely keep his balance, realizing the sheer weight this frail girl was carrying. Barely restraining his shaking hands, the young man inquires about the contents of the boxes. Jin Shu, smiling sweetly, explains that these are just some of the medications collected for donation. Seeing how hard it is for her assistant, the girl sympathetically offers to take the load back. She looks cheerful and not at all tired, despite having carried these boxes herself all the way to the meeting. Trying his best to save face in front of his attractive friend, Han Feng forces a smile. Blushing red from the effort, he brazenly lies that this burden is a piece of cake for him. Jin Shui humorously advises him not to pretend, frankly admitting that she's much stronger than most guys. Confused, Han Feng asks if this is some kind of innate superpower, as no ordinary person could possess such power. The girl looks away for a moment, a slight embarrassment crossing her face. She vaguely replies that it's not a matter of ability at all, but rather of certain personal reasons, leaving the guy completely perplexed. Han Feng asks the girl again, puzzled, trying to understand her vague hint about the hidden reasons for her strength. The boy still doesn't understand who exactly he's dealing with. Jin Shui immediately catches herself and turns it all into a joke, apologizing for her strange words. She blushes visibly and admits that she can't really explain her feelings in case something were to happen. To diffuse the tension, the woman changes the subject and remarks that she still doesn't know her assistant's name. They continue walking through the parking lot, surrounded by other residents of the complex. The guy briefly introduces himself as Han Feng. He looks serious and focused, trying not to show his nervousness under the intense gaze of his new acquaintance. The girl breaks into a wide smile and formally introduces herself in response. Her name is Jin Shui. She curtsies coquettishly, expressing genuine pleasure at meeting him. Han Feng only sighed briefly in response, clearly feeling uncomfortable under the onslaught of positive energy from the pink-haired nurse. Jin Shui continues his interrogation and asks Han Feng what he does for a living. He honestly replies that he's a slacker, which elicits genuine delight and surprise from the girl. Suddenly, their conversation is rudely interrupted by a random passerby. A passing man in gray clothes shoves Jin Shui hard with his shoulder, ordering him to get out of the way. The sudden jolt causes the girl to lose her balance and scream, falling right onto Han Feng. The shocked boy struggles to hold on to both the heavy boxes and the woman who has suddenly landed on top of him. An awkward physical encounter ensues. Jin Shui presses herself against Han Feng, and Han Feng instantly flushes with embarrassment. At that moment, he realizes how soft and fragile she appears, despite her incredible physical strength. Han Feng and Jin Shui quickly recover from their awkward fall. The girl quickly apologizes, while the boy, visibly embarrassed and blushing, tries to pretend nothing unusual happened. The idyll is interrupted by Hina's sudden appearance. Han Feng's ex-girlfriend, wearing a smart crimson down jacket, calls out to him, clearly displeased that he didn't warn her of his presence. Hannah approaches the man closely and, with a suspicious squint, unceremoniously asks who this person is next to him. She literally stares at Jin Shui, trying to figure out the status of their relationship. Seeing the scene unfolding, Jin Shu decides to make a smart retreat. She grabs her boxes and, smiling sweetly, runs away, suggesting the boys have a quiet chat and thanking Han Feng for his help. Watching the fleeing shark, Han Feng curtly asks Hanu the purpose of her visit. The trader from her past life explains that she came for supplies and became very worried when she didn't receive any messages from him. The guy tries to awkwardly justify himself, rubbing the back of his head and claiming he was just about to write. However, Yuna catches him in his lie, sarcastically remarking that she saw him chatting and laughing happily with that pink-haired girl. Her anger suddenly turning to mercy, Hina frowns and folds her hands piteously. She admits that her food supplies are almost empty and wheedlingly asks Hanfeng to share his. A frightening grin, hidden by a shadow, appears on the boy's face. He agrees to help, but immediately pulls Henyu forcefully toward him by the waist, reminding her that she never responded to his previous offer to stay with him for a couple of days. Hina literally freezes in place at this sudden change in tone and physical proximity. Her eyes widen in shock, and her expression betrays obvious confusion at her ex-boyfriend's new, frighteningly confident presence. Trying to save face and extricate herself from the awkward situation, Hina haltingly replies that she simply misunderstood his intentions. She smiles nervously, offering to text her anytime if he wants to talk, clearly eager to get this conversation over with. Hanfeng, maintaining a mask of complete indifference, theatrically sighs and pretends to accept Hana's refusal. He coldly remarks that if she doesn't want to move, then it's time for him to go, leaving her completely confused. Feeling that control of the situation and the valuable resource are slipping away, Hana panics and grabs the guy by the sleeve, begging him to stop. She begins to justify herself, stating that Hanfeng has changed a lot and reminds him of her supposedly serious attitude towards their union. With a pitiful grimace and a blush, the traitor swears she doesn't want to be seen as a kept woman who only sees him for food. She hopefully asks for a little time to think, trying to save face. Hanfeng looks down at her, and in his head there is only one name, Quina, that was the name of the very lover with whom she stabbed him in his past life. Looking at his ex's fake tears, the guy recalls the moment of his death and Hina's embrace with that same man. Rage boils inside him, along with a desire to tear the ugly mask of innocence from this child killer. Suddenly, it dawns on Hanfeng. Why seek out the enemy himself when he can act as before and wait for Hina to lead him into a trap? His anger softened. He smiles sharply and says he was just joking. Hannah freezes with her mouth open, completely unable to keep up with the sudden changes in her sponsor's mood. Hanfeng puts his arm around her shoulders in a possessive manner, promising to wait for an answer and bring more food tomorrow, which completely delights the girl. Hana, beaming with happiness, promises to text later, and Hanfeng waves goodbye, encouraging her not to catch a cold. The game has begun. Hina, satisfied with her small victory, walks away, not noticing Hanfeng's heavy, piercing gaze following her. The boy remains standing in the snowy parking lot, hiding his true intentions behind a mask of calm. A subtle, predatory grin spread across Hanfeng's face. He merely briefly mentioned her lover's name, Juan, as the traitor departed, confirming that his plan for revenge was only just beginning to take shape. Outside, a relentless ice storm rages, turning multi-story buildings into lifeless ice cliffs draped with giant icicles. The entire city is gripped by extreme cold, making it impossible to escape outside. Meanwhile, Hanfeng's phone is receiving angry messages from Li Huina, demanding food and reminding him that he promised to bring supplies 2 days ago. While his smartphone vibrates with spam, the host enjoys a sumptuous dinner, a mouth-watering bowl of rice with succulent slices of grilled meat. Hanfeng devours the hot food with relish, feeling absolute happiness from every bite. He wryly remarks that in such miserable weather, there's nothing better than warming up with a serving of fresh meat. Sitting in his cozy apartment, surrounded by boxes of supplies, the young man reflects on his unique ability. He's come to the conclusion that meat, unlike plants, cannot expand indefinitely. However, Hanfeng discovered another trick. Meat can be processed infinitely using the same energy as soybeans. Surrounded by a mountain of meat cuttings, he activates his power, and his hands glow with a bright green and red light. Previously, he'd only eaten a portion of the sprouted seeds, saving the rest for further processing. Now, he's decided to apply the same process to steaks to create an endless food production cycle. The experiment confirmed his theory. If he cuts a piece of meat and applies magical energy to it, the result remains consistent. From one small piece and a drop of energy, he obtains a complete, fresh product. Repeating this process over and over, Hanfeng creates a whole pyramid of meat reserves. Now he's completely confident that he won't starve to death, and he can afford any luxury in this icy hell. The breaking news is on TV. The global disaster has entered its 19th day, and even in the Maldives, just 78 kilometers from the equator, the temperature has plummeted to a deadly 42 degrees. Drone footage reveals a terrifying scene, a tropical paradise completely buried under ice and snow, with the ocean freezing at an incredible rate. Experts confirm that the ice thickness has already reached 55 centimeters, and the situation in equatorial countries is now no different from the icy hell that is happening in Hanfeng's homeland. Hanfeng sits leisurely on the sofa with a glass of wine, surrounded by mountains of boxes of food, and notes with a grin that the situation in the world is actually much worse than the media is trying to present. Suddenly, the silence of the apartment is broken by a loud crash outside the window. Han Feng jumps up in surprise, spilling wine from his glass. Approaching the window, the guy sees a huge fiery mushroom in the distance and realizes that this is already the seventh explosion in the city, wondering what kind of chaos is happening outside. The skies above the icy skyscrapers are literally teeming with helicopters, and Han Feng watches with alarm as this large-scale air operation unfolds in the midst of a snowstorm. Peering out from behind the curtains, the apartment owner notices that real panic is starting in the neighbors' chats, caused by the sounds of explosions and uncertainty. A spontaneous market has unfolded in the underground parking lot of a residential complex. Residents, bundled up in warm clothes, are trying to barter their belongings for their last scraps of food. However, peace deals quickly escalate into violence, with some attempting to extort money and forcefully take resources, leading to brutal fights right on the cold concrete of the parking lot. While Uncle Luo and the Wang brothers watch in disbelief, Zhang Shuiyu announces new rules. All those in need must now line up in a strict line to receive any supplies. The neighborhood committee organized a distribution point in the coldest and darkest place, the underground parking lot of the second block of the sixth building. Han Feng appears among the freezing crowd. He has a severe cold, constantly sneezing and shivering from the piercing cold, wrapped in his thick down jacket with a fur hood. The boy's nose is swollen and his eyes are watering. Even with his resources, the foray into the icy concrete basement is difficult, and he curses this terrible frost in his heart. Making his way through the angry crowd, Han Feng is met with furious glances and shouts from those accusing him of trying to cut in line. He only came here for valuable information. Otherwise, he would never have descended into this godforsaken place. Looking at the chaos around him, Han Feng recalls that in his past life, it was here that a bloody riot broke out, the true reasons for which remained a mystery at the time. Surveying the parking lot from above, the young man analyzes the current balance of power and the number of people in order to calculate all the risks in advance and prevent a repeat of the tragedy. Han Feng notes with bitterness that the parking lot is full of beggars, barely able to stand from hunger. A conflict breaks out at the food distribution table. One of the residents angrily demands more food, pointing to the piles of boxes behind Zhang Shuiyu. But the coordinator dryly replies that all resources are divided equally. The enraged man demands the return of the food he once donated to the common fund, but Yang Shuiyu remains adamant, declaring that the goods are non-returnable. Zhang Shuiyu, with a polite but forced smile, tries to reason with the crowd, explaining that, given the current state of the disaster, everyone needs to be understanding. He promises to return double the donations once the nightmare is over, but one of the residents angrily demands his supplies back immediately. The tension continues to escalate. An aggressive man accuses the committee of robbery, and those standing in line begin to chime in, suspecting someone is trying to grab more than their share. The crowd behind the disgruntled tenant begins to boil, demanding respect for the general rules of distribution. The argument descends into chaos. People shout at the man, demanding he take his rations and get out of here without holding up the line. "Fat man," shouts from the crowd, directed at the man causing the scene, while the committee tries to maintain a semblance of order. Han Feng watches this circus from the sidelines, maintaining an icy calm. As he watches, he comes to a clear conclusion: it's simply impossible to recoup what has already been sacrificed in times like these. Han Feng analyzes the crowd's behavior, finding it shameful how people try to position themselves as morally superior to others while accusing their neighbors of self-interest. Tensions among the frozen and hungry residents have reached a point where any spark could lead to an explosion. While the crowd rages, someone addresses Han Feng, who is still suffering from a runny nose, from behind. He turns around in disbelief at the cry, "I've never seen such shameless people." It turns out it's an old acquaintance of Han Feng's, a tall guy with tousled blonde hair, wearing a white scarf and blue gloves. He greets his friend cheerfully, calling him brother. The acquaintance is genuinely surprised to meet him in such a place and asks how Han Feng has been doing lately. Han Feng, wrapped in a down jacket, calmly replies that everything is quite fine. However, the boy's appearance suggests otherwise. Han Feng looks exhausted and sickly. His fair-haired friend notices that he's completely fallen apart and asks skeptically if this can really be called not bad. His friend admits that he himself satiates his hunger with plain water, after which his stomach rumbles loudly. Noticing this, Han Feng sympathetically asks if he really has no provisions left. The blonde man admits he'd made a foolish decision. He'd decided to help the community and donated almost all of his supplies to the neighborhood committee. Now that the food is gone and the snowstorm outside is only getting worse, the boy realizes the trap he's fallen into. The blonde man bitterly notes that the committee's rations won't last long. He looks at Han Feng with genuine regret, lamenting that had he known this would happen, he would have kept much more food for himself. Han Feng, maintaining his sick neighbor persona, puts an arm around his friend and conspiratorially proposes a deal. The blonde, intrigued by the possibility of help, listens attentively to what is required of him. The shocked young man asks again, is Han Feng really willing to give him 4 packs of instant noodles and 2 sausages for nothing? Han Feng confirms the deal, modestly adding that he himself is very low on supplies. Overwhelmed by such generosity in these difficult times, the blond man literally bursts into tears of joy, promising to never forget his friend's kindness. Han Feng feigns embarrassment at this reaction and asks his friend to stop his gratitude. Han Feng pats the boy on the shoulder in a friendly manner, promising to take care of him and asking him to come back for food later. The blonde, inspired by the support, is effusive in his gratitude and ready to fulfill any request. As they parted, the friends exchanged encouraging gestures. The blonde gave a thumbs up and promised to wait in line for supplies. Han Feng returned the gesture, watching his bro go. As soon as his friend leaves, a sly grin appears on Han Feng's face. He realizes that the price of a couple of sausages and a few packs of noodles is nothing compared to the fact that he no longer has to personally spy and sniff out information. Han Feng walks away from the crowd, arguing that while he's a little sorry to send his bro into the thick of the line, comfort is more important. He'd rather just lie on the couch at home, eat delicious food, and play video games while others gather gossip for him. Han Feng's thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a loud shout. Someone from the crowd or an acquaintance has noticed him and shouted his name. The boy freezes, his eyes wide in surprise. Before Han Feng could even blink, a resounding slap literally snapped his head around. The blow was so sudden and powerful that sparks flew from his eyes. Haina stood before him, blazing with rage, her hand frozen in midair after swinging. The girl looks genuinely furious, her gaze piercingly cold and her face a mixture of hurt and anger. "You violated my trust," she screams in the boy's face, attracting the attention of everyone around. Right in the middle of the frozen parking lot, in front of a stunned crowd of neighbors, Hina continues her tirade, demanding to know why Han Feng has been ignoring her all this time. The people around her stood frozen in bewilderment, watching this sudden family scene. Han Feng froze in complete shock, his eyes widening in surprise, and the red mark from the blow was already clearly visible on his cheek. He clearly hadn't expected the traitor from his past life to decide to cause such a public scandal now. Coming to his senses, the boy slowly touches his cheek, burning with pain, still unable to believe that this girl had let her hands go. Only one thought runs through his head. Did she just really hit me? Han Feng's memory instantly flashes back to horrific images from his past life, when Haina brought assassins to his door to kill him for food. Rage boils within him. Before he could avenge her death, she had already dared to slap him again. Han Feng's gaze turns icy and frightening, and he glares at Henu, barely containing the darkness within him. "Do you think I'm so easy to push around?" His heavy silence reads as he assesses the situation. However, Hina doesn't relent and continues to press, accusing him of being deaf and demanding an immediate explanation for his behavior. The boy, instantly gaining control of his emotions, lowers his head, hiding his eyes behind his bangs and adopting the look of a guilty victim. Han Feng abruptly changes tactics and switches to harmless neighbor mode, forcing out an apology to Hina. With a completely unfazed, even bored expression, he begins to spin the story of what really happened. Han Feng scratches his head guiltily and complains that he supposedly left all his supplies by the door, and when he returned with the keys, the food had vanished without a trace. Hina, squinting suspiciously, asks if he's looked for the missing items, to which the boy merely shrugs in defeat. Hina hesitates, her gaze fixed on Han Feng. After a brief pause, she asks hopefully if he has any food left. Han Feng rubs his ears, feigning dejection and coldness. He replies that supplies are almost depleted. If they stretch things out and eat once a day, the food will last a couple of days at most. Hina's face instantly lights up with a joyful smile, and she exclaims with delight that this is great news. She clasps her hands in a pleading gesture, beaming with happiness. The girl proposes a brilliant rescue plan. If Han Feng eats once every 2 days, there will be enough food for both of them. With a wild glint in her eyes, she declares that this way they will survive the disaster together. Han Feng looks at her with undisguised contempt, astonished by her impudence and lack of conscience. He's finally convinced that Hina sees him as nothing more than a convenient tool, one she plans to exploit to the fullest. The guy suddenly changes his facial expression to a false one and loudly shouts, "Okay!" Han Feng, with a forced smile, reminds her that he promised her half, and Hina immediately demands she give him everything right now. He skillfully evades this, suggesting they meet in the evening after he finishes cleaning. Hina waves goodbye contentedly, promising to look forward to seeing him again. She feigns concern, advising Han Feng not to linger in the cold lest he catch a cold. Han Feng bids her farewell, raising his hand in return. His face instantly turns stony and cold as soon as she turns away. A snowstorm descends on the city. An icy wind howls between the high-rises, obscuring everything in a white shroud. Han Feng's smartphone screen displays a stack of angry messages from Hina, who has been demanding to be let in and complaining of the cold since 8 o'clock that night. Horrified, he realizes he missed the moment when the situation spiraled completely out of control. Hina, cowering from the icy wind, squats in the empty, dark hallway. Furious and desperate, she wonders if Han Feng has abandoned her again and why he's ignoring her calls. A girl in a pink down jacket is horrified to discover that the building's elevator is out of order. She peers at her phone screen, trying to figure out how many floors she has to climb in this freezing cold. Cursing everything, including Han Feng himself, Hina begins the arduous climb up the icy stairs. She's furious that she's only going to him for the supplies he promised. The girl's strength is draining away, she's breathing heavily, and thick clouds of steam are escaping from her mouth. Hina barely holds onto the railing, admitting to herself that her legs are giving way from hunger and fatigue. Finally, she reaches the desired landing, where the number 16th floor is emblazoned on the wall. It seems the goal is near, but the trials don't end there. Suddenly, the entire building plunges into complete darkness. The power to the residential complex has been completely cut off. Hina freezes in fear, unsure what to do next in this pitch-black void. The girl hears some rustling from above and, pressing her hand to her chest in fear, screams in fright, trying to make out at least someone in the darkness of the stairwell. A dark object hurtles down on Hina from above. She doesn't have time to react before something heavy and dirty hits her. It turns out it was Han Feng. He ran out to meet them and accidentally spilled an entire bag of flour on Hina in the dark. While the boy defends himself by saying he fell asleep and tripped over the railing because the lights were out, Hina, white with flour, furiously calls him a pig. Covered in flour and shivering from the cold, Hina flies into a rage, shouting insults in Han Feng's face. She looks pitiful, her mascara is running, her clothes are ruined, and her body is racked with coughing. While the traitor tries to come to her senses, Han Feng scratches his neck with a feigned guilt. He claims that he actually planned it all this way, continuing to play the role of a fool. To finally appease the guest, the guy hands her a dirty black bag. Hina freezes in bewilderment, eyeing the offered product suspiciously. Peering inside, the girl sees a horrific mess of moldy, rotting food scraps. The bag literally reeks of stench and decay, reminiscent of trash from a dumpster. Hina disgustedly takes out a piece of spoiled meat, horrified that it's being offered to her for food. Han Feng only smiles innocently, explaining that it's all he has left in his reserves. Seeing the genuine disgust on his ex-girlfriend's face, Han Feng takes the bag back. He coolly offers to keep the food for herself since it doesn't suit her. Dying of hunger, Hina's expression suddenly changes and she clutches the bag convulsively, preventing him from taking it. Swallowing her pride, she shouts that she didn't refuse this food. Han Feng casts a fleeting, piercing glance at her, laced with hidden triumph. He observes how far the one who once betrayed him has fallen. Watching Henu greedily bite into a rotten apple, Han Feng recalls how he once idolized and courted her. Now, the goddess is willing to eat rotten food from the floor just to survive, and even convinces herself that if you cut away the mold, the food is perfectly edible. Having completely lost the last of her dignity, Hina demands that the flour she's covered in be handed over to her. She's ready to collect every crumb, while the master of the house silently watches her moral decline. Hina, covered in flour and rot, greedily collects the remaining scraps. She mutters contentedly that there's still plenty of food in the bag, completely oblivious to Han Feng's triumphant grin. The guy descends the stairs, making a caustic remark as he leaves. Such delicacies will give her diarrhea for days. Hina only watches him go, unable to tear herself away from her prize. Han Feng theatrically laments that there's no shower in this weather, so his ex-girlfriend will have to walk around in agony. He leaves with a victorious air, leaving the traitor humiliated in the dark entryway. Abruptly replacing his benevolent fool's mask with a cold, piercing gaze, the boy freezes on the landing. He senses someone's presence and peers into the shadows below. The distinct sound of footsteps can be heard on the steps. Someone, intentionally or accidentally, has been following the owner of the house this entire time, keeping their distance. Han Feng acts instantly. He makes a sharp lunge and grabs the clothes of the mysterious pursuer with a death grip. The boy raises his fist to strike, furiously asking if the stranger is tired of living. However, upon seeing the victim's face, he is stunned. A terrified girl in glasses lies before him. Without releasing his grip, Han Feng pins the stranger against the wall and harshly interrogates her. He wants to know why this person was following him and what she saw. A girl with long purple hair and massive glasses stares at him silently, her eyes wide. She's breathing heavily with fear, unable to utter a word under the pressure. Seeing her slow reaction, Han Feng wondered with irritation if she was really planning on playing the silent game. He realized this meeting could throw a wrench into his plans. Han Feng, having pinned the stranger to the floor, resorts to direct threats. He furiously demands answers and promises to strip her naked if she continues to play the silent game. A close-up of the characters' faces conveys the awkwardness of the moment. The bespectacled girl blushes deeply, looking up at Han Feng, while the young man himself seems to be beginning to realize that his interrogation methods are ambiguous. Han Feng pulls away abruptly and stands up, realizing he's gone too far. With a heavy sigh, he decides to leave the spy alone and just let her go this time. As he walks toward his apartment, the guy tosses a sharp admonition over his shoulder to the girl. He orders her to go home immediately and stop wandering around the floors doing nothing. Suddenly, Han Feng froze, feeling a light touch. He turned around in confusion, unsure what this strange person wanted from him now. It turns out the stranger has grabbed hold of Han Feng's down jacket sleeve, preventing him from leaving. Confused, the boy can only utter a short, "What?" The girl continues to stare at Han Feng silently, her wide eyes filled with a silent plea. The boy becomes nervous and declares that if she doesn't speak, he'll leave immediately. Instead of words, the stranger only timidly extended her hand and pointed her finger in the direction Han Feng was heading. Han Feng, completely confused by the quiet one's motives, asks if she wants him to go with her. She says yes. Han Feng's face shows complete shock and confusion. It turns out he wasn't the only one who had prepared. Han Feng surveys the apartment, which is filled to the ceiling with boxes of food, water, and sports equipment. Amazed by the scale of the preparations, he asks if she really gathered all of this herself, to which she only briefly and calmly confirms. Suspecting something fishy, Han Feng bluntly asks the bespectacled stranger if she knew about the impending disaster in advance. The girl, her expression unchanged, once again utters her laconic confirming his suspicions. As the stranger pulls her jacket over her pink sweater, she explains that it's not magic, but calculation. According to her mathematical calculations, the result was obvious. The planet was headed for a new ice age. The girl shows Han Feng a tablet with messages and says she warned everyone in the building's community chat. The boy realizes with horror she was the very same marginalized person whose apocalyptic predictions everyone laughed at. Han Feng smiles nervously, unable to understand why such a calculating woman would bring him to her home just for this conversation. He's amused that the crazy prophet from the chat room turned out to be a very real and very prepared neighbor. Instead of saying anything unnecessary, the girl decisively points her finger somewhere behind Han Feng, interrupting his reasoning. Han Feng turns around at the bright glow of the monitors, not understanding what exactly she wants to show him. The monitor screen showed a frozen still image from CCTV footage from June 30th. Han Feng standing in an elevator next to huge boxes, apparently transporting his supplies. The next entry, from July 6, shows Han Feng directing a horde of movers carrying dozens of cylinders and provisions into the house. The final frame from July 16th captures Han Feng, dressed in winter gear, greeting someone at the door. He realizes he's been in her sights this whole time, and she knows absolutely everything about his training. Han Feng is completely shocked when he realizes the extent of the surveillance. He asks his neighbor point blank if she really has been spying on him all this time. The girl calmly confirms this with a short, and, not at all embarrassed by the guest, begins to take off her house dress right in the middle of the room littered with things. A deeply flushed Han Feng panicked and shouted, "Why is she undressing?" To which he received the most pragmatic answer, "It's hot." The guy turns away in horror from the clothes scattered on the floor and demands that the crazy mathematician immediately stop this performance and put on pants. After a while, the atmosphere lightens up a bit. Han Feng, having taken off his down jacket, sits on the sofa while the apartment's owner, wearing a loose, long-sleeved shirt, works intently on her laptop. Han Feng tries to structure the information, clarifying that she was following him due to suspicions about his huge reserves, in order to confirm the possibility of their cooperation. While the girl nods dryly, the guy decides to clarify the main question: what exactly does she mean by this cooperation? Instead of answering, the mathematician suddenly closes his laptop, puts it aside, and begins to resolutely crawl along the sofa straight towards Han Feng. Han Feng pressed himself against the back of the sofa and blushed again, desperately trying to understand what this strange person was going to do to him. However, everything turns out to be much more prosaic. The girl simply climbs over it to get to the powerful electric generator located behind the sofa. The math teacher suddenly asks Han Feng to teach her how to use a generator, leaving him completely stunned. He barely has time to respond to her strange requests given the overall awkwardness of the situation. Han Feng finally pulls himself together and starts the massive machine, which begins to vibrate and make noise that fills the entire room. After confirming that the machine is working, he asks the girl if she understands the controls. The stranger peers intently into the guy's face, asking if they're done. Her gaze seems distant, but at the same time, she's clearly studying her guest's reaction. Suddenly, the girl points her finger somewhere to the side, causing Han Feng to turn around nervously. Confused, he tries to figure out what else this unpredictable person wants from him. Han Feng moves on to adjusting the boiler on the wall, explaining to the math teacher how to produce hot water. He sternly instructs her to remember to turn off the tap after use so as not to waste resources. Finding himself at the refrigerator, the guy is horrified by the mess and calls the girl a real slob. Han Feng forces her to help, explaining that raw meat must be unwrapped and stored in the freezer. Han Feng makes his way to the kitchen and gives a safety briefing on working with a gas cylinder. He urges the girl to pay attention while he connects the system to the stove. The cooking process turns into a real spectacle. A column of flame rises from the pan, and the guy enthusiastically explains that the food will only begin to fry at high heat. The math teacher obediently watches the culinary madness, checking the doneness according to his cues. A sumptuous dinner of rice, stewed meat, and traditional Chinese dishes eventually lands on the table. The aroma of hot food fills the apartment, which until recently seemed lifeless. Han Feng and his new acquaintance begin their meal in the cozy, albeit cluttered, living room. He solicitously offers her something to eat before everything gets cold, creating a brief moment of peace amid the icy apocalypse. Han Feng sighs heavily and clutches his head, complaining that a full day of babysitting has left him more exhausted than a battle. He slams his hand on the table in anger, scolding the math teacher for her complete inability to take care of herself. The bespectacled girl merely puffs out her cheeks comically, continuing to devour her food and looking at him with utter incomprehension. With her mouth full and chopsticks in hand, she merely makes a questioning sound, as if Han Feng's complaints don't concern her at all. Seeing her reaction, Han Feng's expression suddenly changed. Anger gave way to an awkward grin, and a bead of sweat appeared on his forehead. He tried to backtrack and turn the situation into a joke, realizing his moralizing had missed the mark. Tired of this pointless dialogue, Han Feng decides to simply fill his stomach. He stuffs his face with his eyes closed, mentally cursing everything under the sun and wishing for this evening to end quickly. Han Feng chews his rice and says dryly over his shoulder that he's going home right after dinner. But his words are interrupted by a strange boom sound coming from somewhere below. The boy turns around in shock and sees that the math teacher has managed to fall asleep face down on the table in the middle of the meal. Han Feng just smiles wryly, amazed at this girl's ability to drift off at the most inopportune moments. The guy covers her with a blanket while she sleeps on the couch. Han Feng explains that it is like raising a child. The woman says it's for him. He thanks her and is surprised it's so much. The woman asks if he wanted anything else. The woman asks to show it again, and the man agrees. The guy says that after talking to the girl who lives next to him for a couple of days, he realized that she is a complete idiot and that there is no common sense in this. Han Feng says that the girl really wants to learn everything she needs to know, since she asks him for help every day and comes to his house. He says this is already an improvement in his culinary skills. The woman explains that in times like these, many people would be happy with such food, and he says that on normal days, even dogs wouldn't eat it. Han Feng says he still doesn't know the name of his interlocutor. The girl explains that she is the messenger of the evil king's true eye. The guy says, okay, let him forget it. The girl eats, holding chopsticks and a bowl of rice. A man shouts that he is scum and is not entitled to any supplies, while another man demands that he leave. A man with a box explains that these are his supplies, and another man asks who can prove that they belong to him. The guy screams that he was first and demands to leave here, and the man threatens to kill him. The guy yells at the man to leave because it's his food. The man responds with a sound of pain. A man steps on black spots. A man presses a button on the device. The men cover their ears and scream, trying to protect themselves from the loud noise. The man with glasses explains that the sound is very loud and painful. The man in the cap says he can't stand the noise. The man says that perhaps the gentlemen have had enough. Han Feng says it's absurd to fight over the last few food supplies. The man coughs, leaning on another man's arm. The boy shouts that if they don't fight, they will die of hunger, and the man explains that because of the donation idea, his family only received a pack of instant noodles and that only after a few days. A man explains that the food given out isn't enough, and donations are running low, so they're fighting for the last supplies, and another man says that's kind of it. Han Feng says that this is simply ridiculous and explains whether they deserve to starve to death. The man says to think carefully about who caused them to end up in this situation, and the other man starts saying, "You." The man says, "Then let me remind you." Han Feng explains that people with more stock sell bread, which originally cost pennies, for tens or even hundreds of yuan. The voice explains that at such an auction, a loaf of bread is divided into 5 or even 10 parts. They eventually manage to make a fortune from the disaster. The guy in the white hat says a fight has suddenly broken out over the last few supplies. The man with the stick explains that he doesn't want to fight. The man in the brown jacket says they can't afford to lose the supplies. The man on the left says they need to decide who's stronger. The man says it's not funny for those with the most supplies not to donate, and explains that they are maliciously raising prices. The man says they will all eventually die of starvation, and asks if that is fair. The man says he doesn't think that's the most important thing right now, and explains that it's important to get up and get their supplies. The man says he's right, and that it's very unfair, and Han Feng explains that they're starving while others are living in luxury. The other man agrees. He says that everything happened because of them, and because of them, they became like this. The man shouts that he agrees. Another man explains that they need to get their food back. Another man says that they will take back what is theirs. The man with the bat says he's not afraid, and the guy with the scarf is surprised and asks why he's so sure. The man in the hood explains that they've been here for a while and know what to do. The guy says these guys are just crazy and explains that something big is coming. The guy screams, and the man lies on the couch with a book on his face and falls asleep. Han Feng is surprised and asks if it's his brother. Li Ziyi explains that the men have gone crazy and are planning to take all the supplies. The man asks who they are. He says a man named Jiang is inciting residents to steal other people's food, and they go door to door, breaking locks. The guy is surprised that this is happening now. Han Feng says everyone is armed and advises them to hide if possible and not to fight them head on. The man explains that he will take care of himself and asks them to be careful. Han Feng says he didn't expect things to turn out this way and says that he, of course, bought. The man says that if crazy neighbors get to his supplies, he is afraid that he will be torn to pieces. Han Feng says we need to prepare. The guy screams that he can't hold the fire extinguisher. In the right panel, a man attaches a folded piece of paper and 2 wires to the wall using pieces of black tape. The left panel shows a fire extinguisher, scissors, a roll of black tape, and an unfolded piece of paper. Han Feng says that the image shows a cityscape with tall buildings covered in snow. The view is from above, revealing the streets and rooftops in winter weather. There are no text or characters in the scene. The guy yells that the power's out and notices that the building across the street is also out. He suggests contacting the administration, then says the connection is down too and swears. Han Feng explains that due to the snowstorm and the high consumption of electricity for heating, everything was bound to come to a standstill sooner or later. The guy explains that snow and low temperatures outside are making it difficult to repair the equipment. Han Feng explains that the power outage could be permanent while pouring gasoline into the generator. He explains that when residents realize they won't be able to call anyone else, they will panic. Han Feng says this could lead to more serious unrest, and at the same time, he tightens the rope on the generator. Half an hour ago, a girl was eating noodles. The guy explains that he wrote in the chat that he would buy all the consumables at 50 times the market price and says that those fools bought it. The man says he spent more than 500,000 yuan on all the supplies and put some of his goods up for auction, where poor people rushed to buy them, making him a good profit. The man says the girl did the right thing by joining him. The girl says yes, and the guy feeds her noodles and explains that as long as he has supplies, the girl will be completely at his disposal. The man asks if this is the right floor and says he remembers someone living here. The man explains that the guys will open the apartment from the front and drag this bastard here, and the guy asks what all the noise is about in the middle of the night. The guy says he saw him buying goods from dozens of residents and explains that he was the one who raised the prices during their conversation. The man says he also remembered the guy who lives here and asks if he's sure it's here. He orders them to stop chatting and just kick down the door. The guy screams. He notices the broken glass and looks at the door in surprise. The guy screams. The man says, "Ha!" The guy is knocking on the door. The guy wonders why there's still no power, then screams when an explosion occurs. The boy is screaming and coughing. Han Feng says it's too complicated and explains that the electricity and internet have already been restored. Han Feng notices the sound and asks what it is. He is surprised and carefully touches the door. Han Feng is surprised by the strand of hair sticking out on his head and asks what happened to him again. The girl asks for help. Han Feng says that evening comes when he is busy. He says he can't understand why the creature isn't attacking them. The man explains that the creature doesn't look like a normal monster and that it might be guarding something important. He tells them to be careful and not provoke it. The man says, "Come in." Hanfeng says that he heard the news that some residents started to break down the doors to get supplies, and therefore advises him to run home because he will not open the door. He explains that the door is locked. The fist hits the surface with force. Hanfeng says they can't let others get ahead of them. The guy asks how many people live on the 18th floor, then says it doesn't matter and that they come in one at a time. A man knocks on the door. The man explains that it looks like no one has reached this floor yet. The man explains that the two apartments belong to them. The guy says he understands. A man asks to give him a crowbar. The man says they've come to pick up supplies and asks if anyone's home. He holds the girl tightly, covering her mouth as the sounds of destruction echo around him. Han Feng says not to be afraid, the door is reinforced, and at the same time holds the woman by the mouth. The door handle turns with a characteristic sound. The guy says that we should first tackle the neighboring apartment and then explains that this door needs to be marked because even the handle doesn't break. The man in the yellow Panama hat says he's hiding from debt collectors, and Han Feng asks for an extra 5 centimeters of steel plate to be added to the door and for the handle to be made stronger. The man with black hair thinks it's a good thing he took the trouble to strengthen the door and handle. The guy explains that he was afraid that the neighbors would hear that there was someone in the apartment. A girl with her head down says thank you. The guy says it looks like they're gone. The girl listens as Han Feng says that he will fix the device, and if next time someone dares to knock down his door, they will die from the electric shock. The guy explains that it is a means of protection, an electric shock, and the girl asks what it is. Han Feng says he doesn't understand why it's so hard to get this stupid thing to work and explains that he still won't understand. He explains that this type of anti-theft device uses the difference between current and voltage, and that everything is very simple, and the guy is surprised. Han Feng explains that you should first turn off the power and then wrap the exposed wire around the door handle to insulate it. The guy explains that you then need to connect the ground wire from the junction box to the handle, and the girl explains that after that you need to turn the power back on. The guy is surprised that it actually worked. The girl explains that the evil king's true eye can see the truth about everything. Han Feng asks how she knows this and then tells her to forget about it. He says that if you need help, you need to speak faster because he is very busy. The guy says he's talking to him, and the man is holding a lot of objects in his hands. The woman says that she will live here from now on, and Han Feng replies, "Oh." He is surprised and says, "Stop, what?" Han Feng screams no and no again, and the man says he'll let her go home. His foot trips over the wires. He screams that he has fallen. The guy screams that he is in pain. Han Feng says it hurts like crazy. The guy screams that it has stopped. Han Feng is surprised, then says that this is his coffee table. He is surprised that he changed shape. The guy is surprised by the purple light and explains that maybe that's why he made the table like that. The guy explains that the toolbox is too. Han Feng is surprised that purple light can soften objects and shakes the axe in his hands. The guy is surprised and says that he already forgot that she is here too. The man remains silent. The girl is silent. The woman says, "You." The girl asks if he is also the messenger chosen by the evil king's true eye. Han Feng is surprised. He says that he is also from the evil king. That's why this happens to him, and explains that it's easy to deceive her, since she is very trusting. Han Feng explains that he can't help because he doesn't know how to do what needs to be done and asks him not to be offended. The boy is surprised and says he's not offended. He says that they are messengers and must support each other, share blood, and the man retells with surprise what it means to share blood. The guy says that she's a girl and she's going to live with him. The girl abruptly closes the door. The man screams and abruptly opens the door with a crowbar. The guy says he hasn't agreed yet and asks if anyone really thinks that this is the lair of the evil king, and then explains that he doesn't care and let him live. Han Feng wonders what that purple light was. He is surprised, asking if he makes things soft. Han Feng says that he only has 2 types of light so far, and the rest have not yet been discovered. He says the purple one appeared when he tripped over a wire and was about to hit the table. Han Feng remembers what it was like. The man falls down, hitting his face on the floor. He's surprised. He says it appeared. He explains that it appeared right after he remembered the dangerous situation. The guy is surprised that he reacts this way to provocation. A man holds a kitchen knife tightly in his hand. The guy says he'll check. Han Feng is surprised that the substance even works on steel. He says it's like jelly. The voice says that he tried again and again. Han Feng explains that the longer the purple light is used, the softer the object becomes, and says that there are no other changes. He explains that this is a useless effect. Han Feng says, however, he wonders what will happen if you mix two lights. A man places a purple glowing object on another person's stomach. Han Feng shouts, "Come on." He is surprised and says, holding an axe in his hand, from which multicolored glowing silhouettes emanate. Han Feng says he's back in shape. He says that he has already eaten today. Han Feng explains that mixing two types of light can change the strength of matter. He says the hardness is quite good. Han Feng is surprised by the hardness. The man asks if his brother is going to give away the stolen supplies, and the brother explains that he himself has nothing to eat. Han Feng explains that they need to keep it a secret, otherwise if anyone finds out, it'll be the end for them. The man says he doesn't understand why they'd hand over anything if it would all be given away to some old women and old men. The guy yells at the man to look back, and the man explains that it's not necessary. A man is surprised that the wall is moving. A man with black hair stares at the wall in silence. The image shows a large face with empty eye sockets and an open mouth, surrounded by a red rim. A man with a mask screams. A sign appears above his head. The guy screams. The man says that the guy screams that it's a ghost. The man remains silent. A man screams. A guy runs down the stairs, holding a bag and a package in his hands. The man screams that he can't breathe anymore and breathes heavily. Han Feng screams as he is attacked by a pink-spotted creature. He says that doing something like that with an entire wall is too much work. Below, a mixture of green and pink substances is shown. A powerful explosion occurs. The guy says he's very tired and then explains that now. The hammer strikes the surface, causing sparks. Han Feng says it's time to check the tempering result. He says he will start. Han Feng delivers a powerful punch to the punching bag. There is heavy snowfall outside. The guy is screaming. The guy says it's so hardened here that even a piece of the wall hasn't broken. The man explains that many residents are almost out of food, and he was only just now able to gather supplies, and apologizes. Han Feng writes it down. The man is surprised. A guy screams that he's in pain, and another guy grabs his arms and holds him on the ground. The guy yells at the man to tell him where he hid all the stolen food, and the man explains that he didn't hide anything and it's all here. The guy says he just saw a man carrying 3 large bags but only bringing one back, and demands he stop pretending. The man explains he's in pain and swears everything is here. The guy shouts that if he doesn't tell me, they'll have to beat the answer out of him. Han Feng stops abruptly. The man asks Han Feng to explain what he's doing here. The guy asks to let the other one go first and explains that if there are any questions, they can just be discussed. And the guy in the patterned hat is surprised that this man hid the food. Han Feng says he'll handle it himself and asks for his consent. The guy says okay. The guy says that for Mr. Jia's sake, he will let go of the man who is screaming in pain. The man explains that he cannot give money because he does not have any. Han Feng asks if the man is okay. The man turns to Mr. Jian and starts talking. 2 garbage bags stand next to each other. One of them is tied, and the other is open and filled with packages and bags of food. The guy explains that there are 5 people in his family, and there is not enough food, so the man says he's keeping it for today, and the other man is surprised and asks why. The man explains that rules are rules, and they gave what they could collect, so they receive a fixed amount of reward. He understands that his interlocutors are in a difficult position, but the man says to return the rest, and he thanks. The guy says that if you need anything, you can safely order him, he will do everything, and the man explains that he should also contact him if anything happens. Han Feng says that those who have already received the supplies should quickly go home. The man and the girl confirm that they understand Han Feng, and the man adds that they will obey. The guy asks how they forced him to give up the hidden food, and is interested in how he agreed, and also why they decided to give him the rations after all. Han Feng explains that he didn't actually do anything, but simply had a sincere conversation with him. The girl is surprised and asks what it was about. He explains that the country's history has seen several rebellions and conflicts caused by the clash of interests between different classes. Han Feng explains that he only said that if someone breaks the rules, the collective will judge him and consider him a criminal, and that this is normal collective behavior, and if you are not caught, you are not a thief. The guy explains that, not to mention the possibility of being legally detained after the disaster is over, he will continue to face reprisals from the robbed residents. The man says that's understandable, and the guy explains that here's how. The man with the pipe explains that he has already eaten today, and Han Feng explains that he always works. The man explains that among such rebels there is always a leader who directs their actions. Han Feng says that in troubled times, heroes always emerge, and this guy is not so simple. The hammer hits the surface with force. The guy screams and hits with a heavy hammer. The guy explains that now the whole apartment is fortified and quite well. The guy screams, and Han Feng says he hears a sound. The guy is surprised that others have come for his supplies. Han Feng shouts who is there. The girl says that she is and explains that she's been thinking a lot lately and realized that she cannot suppress her feelings for Han Feng. Han Feng says that only through adversity can one understand true love, and only the one who truly loves can sacrifice the last thing he has, and then explains that if you don't believe, you just need to open the door and touch his heart. He says it's the same thing she said back then. A man with a bat behind a girl's back says that besides her, there is another man behind the door. The guy says the moment has finally come when he'll finish off the two bastards right here. Han Feng explains that there is no light, the enemy is obviously hiding somewhere, and he will be in plain sight, and if he can't kill him with one blow, he can be counterattacked. He says that if he hopes for an electric shock, they would have to touch the door handle at the same time, which is clearly impossible, and explains that he is not sure of its effectiveness. The guy says that he needs to calm down. He has finally waited for this moment, so it's better not to rush, and first he needs to think everything through. Han Feng explains that the biggest threat to him now is not Li Huina, but the man hiding in the dark. The guy explains that he can't just go out to determine the enemy's position and strike, and says that he needs to somehow figure this out in advance from the apartment. Han Feng is surprised. He remembers that he was hiding somewhere behind the door. The guy explains what should be in his area. Han Feng says it will take time, but it should work. The girl asks Han Feng to open the door and asks if he is still there. She repeats Han Feng's name. The guy asks if this guy is worth being robbed. The girl explains that he has some food left and she recently remembered that before the disaster, he unloaded a truck full of supplies. The man says there will be enough food to last for a long time. A man screams. The man says he can't afford to be caught. The man asks the girl if she hears anything, and the girl explains that she doesn't understand what the sound is. The man says it seems like the sound is coming from somewhere behind him. A man screams and receives a powerful blow to the face. The girl screams, the man falls, blood flows from his body. A guy asks if a man lying on the floor is okay, and the man screams. The guy explains that he shouldn't be scared like that. The girl screams and reaches out to the door. The guy screams and throws a fire extinguisher. The girl is surprised. The guy is screaming. The girl asks not to joke like that. The guy is screaming. The guy is coughing. The guy is surprised and says that he is. The man asks for help. The guy is screaming. The girl is surprised when a gloved hand appears in front of her, reaching through the smoke. The girl tries to hold on, grabbing the man's arm. The man pushes the girl away and she falls backward. The girl screams that she needs help and runs away while the man watches her go. The guy says she ran away so fast. The guy screams that he is in pain, and Han Feng is surprised. The man shouts who gave permission to get up, and the guy shouts. The guy asks to wait, and the man laughs. The man laughs. The boy says that if he is touched again, his father will do something to this person, and is surprised, asking if he knows who his father is. The man shouts that he doesn't care who the father is, and explains that he is beating him, not the father. The man says, wait, the woman is surprised that he is a brother. The guy says that he has no complaints against the other guy, and asks why he. The guy shouts that he has to ask. The guy screams that he is not worthy of living and asks why the other wanted to kill him, demanding an explanation. Han Feng shouts that he wants an answer. The man says, phew, and oh. The man coughs. Han Feng says he's not going to give up. The guy asks why he is doing this and what his motives are. The man speaks his motives. The guy shouts that he should stop playing dumb. The guy screams that they are asking about his motives, although he himself wanted to kill him, and laughs. The guy is screaming. Han Feng screams. A man screams, and another man laughs. A man screams. Han Feng is surprised. The guy says he can't believe it happened, and explains it's not his fault. The girl says she doesn't intend to blame anyone and just wants to understand what happened. Han Feng says he needs help. He says it was very cruel, and the girl wasn't even scared. He explains that the girl is a bit alarming, and it's better not to let her live in his house. The girl explains that those people could return at any moment to take revenge, and if you stay here, you'll be involved too. The man listens. The woman says, uh-huh. Han Feng says it's for his own good and advises him to live better at home. The girl says she wants to stay here, but he remains silent. Han Feng says it's dangerous here, and they could both die. The woman says there's no need to worry, because the evil king's true eye will help them. The man listens. The girl says she's tired and will go to sleep, and the guy asks what happened. Han Feng shouts stop and says, stop pretending and evading stupidly. He is talking about real problems. The guy grabs Han Feng by the shoulder, and he is surprised. The woman says to come here. The man asks, what? The guy opens the door. Han Feng is surprised and asks why this was done. He is surprised and says that he can't believe it. The voice explains that those who have already received rations can go to their apartments and not take up space. The man explains that the food is out and asks everyone to wait a bit. The man explains that a new batch will be arriving soon. The man says that everyone needs to remain calm and not create a fuss. The man explains that everyone will receive the food in turn. The man explains that the situation is temporary and will improve soon. The girl screams. The man in the hood is silent. The rest of the people stand in line. The man says to keep the rations. The woman explains that apartment 601, building 4, last name Liu, 1 ration. A man says it's apartment 601, building 4, and another man explains that the girl from 601 was just there. The girl in the red hooded jacket is holding something in her hands and is silent. The boy is surprised that he didn't answer her all night and asks why he suddenly lost consciousness. The girl explains that it was Han Feng's doing and asks if he set the traps. The girl says that what worries her most is the moment when he finally opened the door. The guy notices that there is light in the apartment and heat is coming from there, which means the owner obviously has something for generating electricity and is surprised that he prepared in advance for a snow disaster and must have a lot of supplies. The guy says that he secretly prepared, didn't say anything, and gave away some unnecessary garbage with waste, and also explains that it is necessary to find out about everything as soon as possible. The woman says, well, that's it. A man yells at a girl to stand still. The guy is surprised that this is their Huena. The guy tells Huane that they lit a fire in the hallway on the 5th floor and suggests they go warm up. Huane silently adjusts his hood. The woman explains that it will be warmer at home. The man holds a flashlight and looks at her. The man asks her to wait and explains that he has plenty of food, inviting her to stay with him for a couple of days, and then says that he has always liked the girl. The girl responds irritably. The girl screams that no one will want to accept his waste. The man says the girl with the shameless face took the supplies, thinking no one would notice, and warns that he will tell everyone she was pretending to donate food. The girl asks to let her go, saying, it hurts. The man explains that he is talking about this lady, and the girl wonders if she understood correctly that someone simply took someone else's food. The girl screams to be left alone and stabs the man. The guy screams that he can't die because he has a daughter. The man shouts that she is a bitch. A man yells, stop, and gets slapped. A boy screams that you can't hurt girls, and a man falls to the ground screaming. A man asks what just happened, and another man explains that it seems like someone is in trouble. A man screams that someone has fallen to the ground and asks for Mr. Jiang, while another man says there's a fight. The guy is breathing heavily. The girl asks how he is, if he is injured, and if anything might be hurting. The man says he is fine and thanks her. The girl says she'll give you her business card, and that if anything suddenly hurts, you can come. She explains that the head nurse at the city hospital treats colds for 1,000 rupees and fevers for 2,000 rupees, with the final cost varying depending on the severity of the illness. The guy refuses and thanks. The girl holds a note and a flashlight. The girl screams that she's a damn bitch. The man tells her to keep her damn nose to herself and not poke it where it doesn't belong. A man shouts that he will kill another man and says that he can believe it or not. The guy is screaming. The boy screams and kicks the man. The guy with the cigarette says that all his life he believed that the most disgusting person is the one who beats women, and the man lying on the ground says, ah! A guy in glasses shouts for people to move aside. A man in a dark jacket explains that it's Mr. Jiang, and another man says that they've arrived. The man tells Mr. Jiang that the girl is acting as if she has a right to demand supplies, and he saw her arguing with a rich man who was raising prices. The girl denies it. A guy with a white scarf shouts that a man who beats women has no right to complain here. The guy screams that he can't believe it, and Han Feng explains that he doesn't intend to kill. He says that the committee's job is to protect everyone and not let people die of hunger, and the man apologizes to Mr. Jian and admits that he was wrong. The girl says to just walk on by next time. The man in the white coat and the man in the dark jacket walk forward. The man explains that the two of them suffered for nothing and asks the girl what he thinks about his words about the committee, whether she would like to join. The boy says he's not interested in robberies and wouldn't join them even if he were starving. The man and woman listen to him. The girl apologizes to Mr. Jian and explains that she can't accept his approach, but is always willing to help others as a medical professional. Han Feng thanks Mrs. Jin. The girl asks if she can join them. The man with glasses turns to her. The girl says that she always admired Mr. Aizian, but there was no opportunity to talk about it, and now everything is different. The man asks if Ms. Lee is mistaken and explains that the guy can fight and the girl can heal, and what is she useful for? The man says that she has no value for them now, and the girl replies, "Oh." The guy says he can't afford to relax because the enemy is too strong. The guy tells Brother Jian that he knows where there are a lot of supplies. The man says he has fan blades and explains that there are triangular ones, square ones, and also a surveillance camera. Han Feng says right now. The guy shouts that she found it. Han Feng pauses the action. The guy shouts that it's a mannequin and doesn't look like what he described. The girl holds the mannequin's hand and focuses a glowing ball of energy on it. Han Feng says, "Oh," and explains that this girl has the ability to store things in space. He says his house is already full of junk. He explains that she can open some kind of black hole and then suck everything she sees into it, but finding anything in there isn't that easy. Han Feng asks why he can't find anything inside, and wonders if it's a virtual space or if it transports things to other places. The man explains that he's never explored it, but is certain the space is vast. He offers to stick his head in there to look and maybe find something, and the girl agrees. The guy says that she puts her hand there, so everything should be fine. Han Feng says that if he can't get through this, he won't be able to become stronger. The guy screams that he can't believe what's happening, and the girl explains that it's a portal to another dimension. Han Feng says look, he is surprised to find himself in a whirlpool. A guy screams after being caught in a whirlpool. The man is surprised that it is so huge. Han Feng says it's now clear who cleared out the entire supermarket overnight, and compares it to looking for a needle in a haystack. He is crying. The guy is screaming, "What the hell?" The man screams, creating a glowing portal around his hand. The guy is screaming. The guy is coughing and crying. Han Feng screams that it feels like all the moisture has been sucked out of him and asks why they didn't warn him there was no oxygen there. The girl explains that she didn't go in there and her hands were fine. The woman says, The girl screams that she will do it now. The guy shouts that, finally. The guy says he found more. The guy screams that he doesn't know what's going on. Han Feng is surprised that this is. Footsteps are heard on the stairs. Two men climb a staircase in a dark room lit by light coming from the top floor with number 18. A man explains that there is a monster on the 18th floor and asks if they really want to go up, and another man says that they don't want to run into it. The man says that it is the 21st century and they believe in some kind of ghosts, explains that Mr. Jing asked them to check because he trusts them, and says that they cannot let him down. The man asks what will happen if that girl deceived Mr. Jing. The guy says they've arrived and is glad they decided to follow. The girl explains that there's no point in talking nonsense because they weren't sent here for no reason, and suggests they finish quickly and come back. Han Feng says he'll move on to the second part of the plan and begin, and then the girl will appear. The girl agrees. The girl says that the timing needs to be precise. He looks at the device in his hand. A man shows a stopwatch with a time set to 2 minutes. The guy asks if they heard anything, and the other guy explains that maybe it was that ghost, and the third guy sighs. 3 bright glowing balls appear on the stairs. Cars with big wheels and lights speed down the road. A man is surprised that they are toy cars. The man explains that the car is taking off. The man says that the explosives have already been ignited. There is a powerful explosion, accompanied by a scream. A man asks where they are. Another man says it's paprika. A third screams that his eyes hurt. The man is surprised. A flying machine with 4 large balls is shown. An explosion with sparks and smoke is shown. A man shouts that he needs to run. The image shows a flying drone with bright lights on its body turned on. Han Feng is surprised, asking if he's quitting. The guy explains that they need to fly closer because he wants them to learn their lesson this time. A man screams and runs down the stairs holding a crowbar in his hand. The man yells, "Get lost!" Han Feng says, "Be careful," and asks them to be careful not to hit the drone. The man shouts that he is sending the interlocutor away. A loud bang is heard. The woman says she's lost control of the left side and can't stabilize. The guy yells for them to do something, as this is their only drone. A sound of impact appears, and a countdown is played in the background. The man shouts to hold on. The guy says, "Oh." Brightly colored fireworks explode over the city against the backdrop of falling snow. The woman explains that the right propeller has failed and they need to descend. Han Feng tells them to quickly find a place to land without crashing the drone. He explains what was found outside the stairwell window. The girl says she'll go get the drone because it's too important to them. The man explains there's a dead body there. Han Feng says it's a corpse. The guy says to enlarge the picture. The boy is surprised, asking if this is Brother Li. Han Feng asks why he's there. The girl remains silent. He is surprised, asking if he was robbed too. The guy says he'll be back soon and has a key, so don't open the door for anyone. He opens the closet. The girl is sitting on the couch. Han Feng explains that he can't eat because he's already eaten. He is surprised. The guy is surprised, and the girl explains that it's to keep in touch. The man thanks, passing the radio into the hand of another person. Han Feng hopes this thing won't be needed and presses the shutter of his pistol. He walks down the stairs with his flashlight on. Han Feng says the 17th floor is clear, then explains that the 16th floor is clear, and then tells that the 15th floor is clear. He says that according to measurements taken from a drone, the temperature outside is minus 49.9 degrees, and explains that without any protective measures, a person would freeze to death within 30 minutes. The voice explains that the situation with Brother Li is very bad and that we need to hurry. The man says that people need to be careful if they're going to go there. The guy with the flashlight explains that he understands and thanks you for your concern. The man in the blue jacket says that they need to give them 3 pieces of thick cloth first. The man at the table thanks Mr. Jiang. Han Feng says they will never treat people unfairly when it comes to donations, and that it's his responsibility. The men thank Han Feng and call him Mr. Jiang. The girl asks the man if she can join them now, and the man says no. The man explains that they can't confirm that this is the work of the girl's friend, and if Uncle Lu hadn't personally seen someone moving resources, he wouldn't have believed it at all. The man in the long coat says to inspect this floor together and bring the tools for Miss Li. The girl in the red coat agrees. The man in the hat orders them to pack their things immediately. The man says that regardless of whether the information is real or false, and whatever the purpose, during the upcoming operation he hopes the woman will be able to demonstrate her worth. The girl is surprised and breathes heavily. The guy with the bat says they have to be careful because there are a lot of enemies here, and the girl explains that they can't retreat and must fight to the end. The man explains that they have a plan and they must follow it to survive. The girl says she understands. The man remains silent. The man explains that each person is an important part of the team and asks them to take care of their own safety during the climb. A girl with a hammer walks silently alongside. A man with glasses and a long coat walks ahead, followed by the other team members. Han Feng explains that there are many people below and warns them to be careful. The masked man explains that they must move quickly or they will be spotted. Han Feng explains that they have no other choice and they begin to climb the stairs. The guy calls Mr. Jiang and tells him to take a look. The guy shouts that it is Li Su. A man drinks from a bottle. The guy screams and drinks from a bottle. The guy screams that it's hot. It's hot. The man is surprised. Han Feng explains that he brought a thermos with a hot drink, and the guy with the hat says it will help warm him up. The guy in the tasseled hat is silent. The man with the headband is shouting that he's out of luck. The man in glasses and a coat is silent. The guy with the checkered hat tells Li Jin that Mr. Jiang saved him, and he didn't even thank him. Li Jin coughs, covering his mouth with his hand. The guy is screaming. The guy says that even if he wants to thank someone, it will be those from whom Han Feng stole resources, and demands that he stop pretending to be a hero. The guy screams that he will kill, and he stands next to him. Han Feng sincerely invites Brother Li to join them, explaining that they can only overcome the disaster if everyone works together. The man, irritated, says he said many times before that he'll never join. He tells Li Ziyi to stop refusing and being so shameless. The guy with the scarf says he's trying to force him to join them. Han Feng stares ahead silently. He asks if his brother has some misunderstanding with them and explains that they just want him to share his power so that the weak have a better chance of survival. The boy yells at Han Feng for only giving the old idols 1 meal every 3 days and explains that it's no different from waiting for death. A guy on the stairs is shouting that he has no parents and that his interlocutor's methods won't work on him. A man in a coat and a guy in a scarf are listening to him. Han Feng is surprised that Jiang Shuiyu doesn't care much about them, visiting them once every 3 days. The man explains that the committee wants to attract young people, so they accept the old, the weak, the sick, and the disabled, and warns that if this continues, conflicts will eventually arise within the committee's administration. The hooded guy yells that Li Jin doesn't appreciate their kindness, and demands that he join them, or else leave and stop bothering them. The guy screams, and the man suddenly bumps into him with his forehead. The guy in the tasseled hat says he refuses to go and asks what the other guy is going to do about it, while the man in dark clothes across from him shivers. The man in glasses explains that the guy in the hat is in pain. The guy yells that he's watching, and the men explain that they're retreating. The guy is screaming. The guy in the hat and mask says he's not afraid, and the man with the bat explains they're not going to fight. Han Feng explains they came here to talk. A group of men with bats approach one man. The guy says he's not afraid of the kids and encourages them to come over. Han Feng says that his brother's condition is bad and it seems like he will fall at any moment, so he should go help him. The guy explains that there are too many of them, and even if he goes, he won't be able to do anything. Han Feng says that Brother Li has saved him so many times that he can't just watch him risk his life. The gun goes off. Han Feng remains silent. The guy says he'll start if they want to fight. The man screams. The man is surprised. A shot is fired from a firearm. The bat falls to the floor with a dull sound. A guy screams. A man with a bat in his hand speaks. A man in a mask explains. A man in glasses watches. The guy in the mask says it's a gun. The man is surprised that it was a gunshot and demands they stop joking, explaining that it's impossible. Han Feng shouts that no one should move. The guy with the flashlight says that the little brother, the guy in the hat and mask, is silent. The man in glasses and a scarf is silent. The man with a bandage on his face and a baton is silent. The man behind them is silent. The boy wonders why Han Feng left his home and where he got the gun. A man with a bat stands in front of Han Feng who explains something while holding a gun. He says it's the key to his house and offers to take it so they can retreat slowly. The man agrees. The guy with the bat asks Han Feng what they should do now, and Han Feng explains that they should take advantage of the opportunity while they are not being noticed. The guy in the hat with the bat says that they won't let them pass, and the man in the coat explains that no one will pass through here today. The guy in the blue hat tells you to drop your weapon and kneel, and the guy with black hair and yellow gloves tells you not to move. A man in a hat with ear flaps says that if they don't leave now, they'll die, and explains that they can't stay in this place. A man in glasses explains that there have been many deaths in this area recently and warns that it's dangerous. A man in a mask and scarf explains that they need to find a way out. The guy tells Brother Li to go, and Han Feng warns that he will shoot anyone who moves. The guy in the hood says it's cold here. The man in a hat explains it's because there's no heating in the basement. The guy with short blonde hair says it's always this cold here in the winter. The hooded man says it's quiet here. The hatted man explains it's a good place to meet. The masked man says they need to be careful. The man by the railing says they should wait further. A guy with glasses asks if anyone knows this guy. The girl is surprised that it's Han Feng and explains that the place they were going to is his house. The man remains silent. The guy screams that she didn't tell them earlier that he had a gun, and the girl explains that she also sees it for the first time. Han Feng says to forget about it and that he believes that Miss Li will not lie to them. The girl asks, Mr. Jung. The man explains to think everything through carefully. The girl says that even if he has such a weapon, does he really not have any reserves? The man shouts that he is right and explains that perhaps it is the man who is raising prices. The man explains that the man Uncle Lu saw is most likely him. The guy with the hat asks Brother Zhang if they're still going with the original plan, and Brother Zhang explains that if he shoots them with a gun, the girl listens. The man explains that if he were capable of murder, he would do it right now and says that he does not believe that they can hide in his house forever and not come out. The man explains that they will return and prepare some security measures before returning. The boy says they will clear ADL-4 as soon as possible. The guy explains that his hands are shaking, and Han Feng tells him not to panic because it seems like no one is chasing them. The guy turns the key in the lock and is surprised that it has become so warm. The guy with black hair says that he is ready to shoot, and the blonde guy says that we need to go in faster and confirms this. The man says it's a radiator. The guy is surprised that it's a generator. The guy says this room is full of supplies. The boy asks his brother what exactly is happening to his house, and Han Feng explains that it's a long story. The guy is surprised. The woman asks where the drone is. Han Feng says he forgot. The guy asks what kind of drone. The girl and he remain silent. The man says he understands. The guy with black hair says it's too much to predict this disaster. The man with blonde hair explains that even such extensive preparation is difficult and that diligent study is actually beneficial. Han Feng explains that he was previously afraid that information about his reserves would leak, so he didn't tell Brother Li the truth. The guy puts his chopsticks down on the table. The other guy thanks Han Feng and says that without him he would have starved to death, and the way he treats him is very kind of him. The guy says, Brother Li. Han Feng says he has plenty of food and asks him to continue eating, and the man with a scarf around his neck calls him little brother. He says he's such a good guy, but the man remains silent. The blonde man says the situation in their complex is completely different now. The man asks if Han Feng remembers the information he sent before the power was cut off. Han Feng confirms. A guy with the last name Zhang goes around stealing supplies in the name of collectivism. He explains that there are those who watch him, and there are those like him who disapprove of his actions. The guy with the surname Zhang didn't seem too bothered by the fact that several people had left the group. The guy explains that behind everyone's back, he sent Jin Qingwei to take care of them, saying that it was in order to reduce the threat to them. The blonde boy explains that Jin Qingwen and Jin Qingwu are the older brothers of the university twins, adding that they studied so much that their intelligence returned to the womb. Han Feng asks for the names. The girl remains silent. He says it's no wonder the committee grew so quickly with such underground tricks, and the man explains that this man is not easy to deal with. Han Feng says that evil will be repaid according to its merits and asks to guess who they tried to rob, and the man asks who exactly. The man shouts that Li Jinghao. A man reveals that he is a boxer who was once a middleweight champion and delivers a powerful punch to another man. The boy asks if the committee members were badly beaten. The man explains that this is exactly the case, but Zhang refused to admit defeat and lose face. The man says that with his encouragement, these people continued to go to Li Jinghao to fight him. The man says they were all eventually beaten by Li Jinghao. The man explains that because of this incident, Li Jinghao also gathered a group of followers, among whom are two people who are quite famous. The guy with blue hair says that one of them is named Zheng Yanyu. He was a fan of Li Ziyi, and that he heard that he was involved in underground boxing for several years and was famous for his speed. The man says that the other man's name is Jin Zhongkai. He is an ardent admirer of Li Jinghao, and it is said that he is endowed with divine power and his body is as strong as a monster's. The man says that with the authority of these two and Li Jinghao, they have already become another faction in the area, and this group of people truly hates the hypocritical Zheng Shui. The guy with the white scarf explains that Zhang was thinking about how to resolve the conflict and ultimately decided to rob the other guy's supplies. Han Feng explains that if that's true, then bringing in this guy was just a temporary scheme on Zhang's part. The guy with the white scarf says that he's been collecting money before he passes out. He says it's no wonder Zheng Shui wants to involve Brother Li and explains that his group isn't doing very well. The guy asks what that sound was. A woman says someone has arrived. The next scene shows a group of people with backpacks standing by a closed door. A man in glasses points toward the door. The dark-haired guy says he'll electrify the door, and the blonde guy is surprised. The girl's hand tugs at the dark-haired guy's jacket sleeve. The girl says she smells sulfur, and Han Feng is surprised. The guy screams that he is gray, and two people fall to the floor and make sounds of pain. Han Feng shouts that no one will dare to use explosives against him. The guy with glasses explains that they have to use homemade explosives because they're not that powerful. He asks if the other guy knows anything about it. The man yells that there are a bunch of creatures around. The guy in the blue jacket says, "That's it." The man in the gray jacket with a backpack and the man in the blue jacket with a box are listening. The man in the hat opens the door. The man in the dark jacket with a blue hat is standing nearby. The girl is explaining something to the man in the eye. The guy says the girl brought Zhang Shui here. The girl explains it. Han Feng tells his brother to move away from the door, and the boy looks surprised. Han Feng clenches his hand into a fist. The guy is screaming. The guy explains that the door is electrical, and the man screams what happened. The man in glasses is silent, looking at the body with sparkling energy. A man in a hooded hood with a flashlight and a man in a hat are looking intently at the body. The man in the blue jacket is explaining something to the others. Han Feng explains to plant explosives at the edge of the door where it meets the wall, and to try using 2 packages this time. The man says, "That's good." The image shows a closed door with 2 devices on either side, each with a red indicator. A powerful explosion occurs with flying debris and fire. The door shown is number 10804, with cracks and damage visible around it. The man with the bat says it's still intact. The man with glasses and the man in a helmet are shining flashlights into the room. The man is silent. The man explains that there were definitely no problems with explosives and says that this guy had prepared for defense in advance. The man in the coat explains that this time they need to use 3 packages of explosives together, and he will show the place for the explosion, and also says that if nothing happens, then they will continue to increase the amount of explosives used. The man says they must seize his house today. The guy with blonde hair screams, the guy with black hair screams. The boy screams that he is in pain, and the man screams that he is in pain too. A guy asks if he thinks the explosions are getting louder and louder, and another guy explains that he can't hear him. The guy asks what that sound is and shouts, "Brother, brother." The guy shouts that the wall is cracking, and Han Feng says cracking and suggests adding more things to block their way. He says that if things continue like this, the cracks will become bigger and bigger. Han Feng says there's no point in blocking it. They need to quickly remove everything. He has an idea. The guy asks how long it will take to move it all. The guy with blonde hair says he'll do it. The man with black hair listens. The boy shouts that such a small doll like the girl should quickly return and hide in the bedroom, and the girl raises her hands. Han Feng remains silent. The guy screams, "What the hell is this?" The girl holds a glowing blue ball in her hands. The image shows a girl releasing a powerful energy beam directed downwards and forwards, while two men watch the action. The guy with long hair explains that everything is ready. The guy with blonde hair says it's so scary and asks if it was all sucked in. The girl stands to the side. The boy shouts that he's surprised. Han Feng concentrates, releasing purple flames from his hands. He explains that he will first soften the walls, like last time, to see if he can change their shape, and that he must control the area of impact, otherwise the hardening process will take a long time. Han Feng says he'll do it right now. He places his hands on the walls, surrounded by green and pink light. The guy says that violet light in combination with green light not only strengthens but also restores. The guy shouts that Han Feng is very capable and asks if it is magic or superpower, and Han Feng explains that it is difficult to explain. A guy yells at a girl to lie down. He looks away in surprise. Three characters sit on the floor, covering their ears with their hands and screaming. Han Feng says he just strengthened it and asks why it is cracking again. He explains that they are blowing up the floor. The guy says that if this is really the case, then it will be useless, no matter how it is repaired. Han Feng says he has a dangerous idea and asks if they are willing to trust him for once. The woman says, The guy says whatever it is, you just have to say it. The guy says to listen carefully to what he is about to say.